start with the Pledge of Allegiance. We do have Spanish translation available.
We have Vivian Rodriguez with us tonight for translation.
Sí, muy buenas noches y bienvenidos de parte de la Junta Directiva del Distrito Escolar de Santa Bárbara. Si hay alguien que necesita la ayuda de un intérprete, por favor levante la mano para darle un audífono. Gracias.
Thank you. And we also have headsets available for the hearing impaired. Introductions, proclamations, presentations, or recognitions.
We do have two introductions, and the first is an introduction of Casey Kilgore, here with students to share from Franklin Elementary School. Casey, bring your talent right up here.
Good evening. From Franklin School today we have two groups. We did not bring our mariachi this time. We brought our ukulele third graders, I'm sorry. Our ukulele third graders.
Come on over.
And they are going to play This Land Is Your Land, This Land Is My Land. They're under their direction of their teacher, Miss Osborne. They have ukulele class probably once a week with a few people from the community, and it's just exposing to different type of music, so we're excited to have them. How about this?
We are third graders from Franklin School. We have been taking ukulele lessons since October. Our ukulele teachers are Carl, and August. We will be singing This Land Is Your Land. Please sing with us. Thank you, Ms. Osborne and Ms. Oba's third grade class.
So that's our ELD for the day. No. And we have one other group that's here, and it's our 6th grade girls. This is our, I'm sorry, 6th grade group, not our 6th grade girls. And this is our program that we're trying to show that there's activities in junior high to see if they like for electives. So this is the Eaglettes, which is a mini version of the Donettes from the Santa Barbara High School. So we had some of the girls come down along with the direction of the teacher, Maria Ray, and she taught them some cheer so they're able to then go on and become Donettes of the future.
Let's go, Franklin, let's go. Let's go, Eagles, let's go. We can fly to the score with one swish. You might be the cast, but the Eagles are the best. Ready, go. Stomp, stomp, clap, 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 chest, chest, clap, clap. E-A-G-L-E-S. That is how you spell the best. Now that you all got the beat, try it with your hands and feet. I said burn, it's cold in here. I said there must be some eagles in the atmosphere. I said oh, ice, ice, ice. Oh, ice, ice, ice.
They are going to 6th grade. Hey, 6th graders, if you want to see yourselves on TV Saturday, 5 o'clock, you're going to be on Channel 18, and you can see yourselves performing. That'll be fun. You were great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kilgore. Those were wonderful, 3rd graders and 6th graders. Thank you so much.
Well, I do have one other announcement. Amy Alzina, would you please come up to the podium for just a moment? I want to announce the appointment of Amy Alzina as the principal of Adams Elementary School, starting July 2009. Amy approached Robin and me a number of weeks ago about her desire to head Adams School. Her transfer will take place at the end of June. We will be meeting with the Community Academy staff soon about finding a new leader for their school. Amy's been with us for 10 years. She has taught at the academy, PE, kindergarten, 1st grade, 5th grade. She's been an administrative intern, and she has been principal at the Santa Barbara Community Academy for the past 3 years.
Thank you. I just want to thank the board so much. I'm very excited to have the honor and privilege to work with such a great staff over at Adams School. I feel that there's such a great opportunity to see that school just become wonderful. And I'm also saddened to leave the academy, but I'm also happy at the same time knowing that they're at a good place right now and that they're just going to continue to excel. And I think together we can both become great schools. So thank you again.
Thank you, Mrs. Alzina. It is a loss to the academy. I'm so glad that you're staying within our district, though, and I think it's just going to be a great thing for Adams School, and I know that the parents and staff there will be really enthusiastic, so thank you.
Thank you.
And now the superintendent's report.
Good. I do have a couple of items to report on. We've been following the situation with the swine flu very closely. Yesterday, we informed staff, parents, and the community that the virus has not yet been identified in our community, that it may, and that until then, our schools remain open with during regular hours, and all extracurricular activities will continue as planned until further notice. We let everyone know that we have studied various contingencies. In fact, we spent a lot of time in planning for emergencies in the hopes that we never have to use those plans. But if an outbreak threatens our community, we're prepared to act quickly and to close schools if necessary. We also shared flu prevention tips. We have signs like this that are going out to the sites. What you do for this flu is what you do for any flu. You keep your hands washed. You avoid contact with people who have the flu. When you sneeze, you throw your Kleenex away in the wastebasket. And when you have the flu, you stay home, away from work, away from public places. This information was disseminated to staff through our electronic newsletter, to the community in a meeting with reporters, posting the information in English and Spanish on our website, and all parents through our teleparent call-out system. A copy of the information is located on the table in the back of the room. In fact, there's a one-sheet printout about where we currently are and what we're doing about it. We will continue to monitor swine flu information from the County Health Department as well as the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Well, board STAR testing is underway and continues through the first part of May. And I want to comment tonight on the board brief. The board brief is a collection of reports and articles on school and district matters. A copy of the April 17 board brief is on display in the reception area, or it can be found in my office. I'd like to highlight just two items from the most recent board brief. The first was the calendar for single plans for student achievement, which necessitates scheduling the single plans for board approval at the end of October. We were trying to move it up, but if you read the report on it, you'll see why the end of October is necessary. The second is the results of the student, staff, and parent survey as they related to the updated La Cuesta facilities plan. The student survey clearly shows that the majority of the students on the La Cuesta Dos Pueblos campus would choose a site other than San Marcos, and the board wanted to know that information up front. So when we have that report in a couple of weeks, you will have that information. La Colina will host a special cultural proficiency training series for all staff who want to participate. It's entitled Creating Equitable Schools, Connecting with Students, on May 4 and 11. Fundamental to its purpose is to connect with all students and to create a safer, equitable, and accessible school. Just Communities will facilitate the training, and we've had a number of trainings with Just Communities in the past. Upcoming events, and there's a handout again on the side table. San Marcos High School will hold a lunchtime poetry slam in the library tomorrow and on Thursday. Santa Barbara High's performance of Footloose continues through sometime. Footloose continues through Saturday. Thank you. San Marcos will present Man of La Mancha beginning this Wednesday. Dos Pueblos performs Funny Little Thing on Friday and Saturday. Dos Pueblos will hold a spring swing dance, complete with swing lessons, on Monday. And the 9th annual Employee Appreciation Day for all employees in the school district will take place on Thursday, May 7, at Borders downtown. And board members, I hope you'll be able to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. We are moving on to item C.
Could I have a question for
Yes.
Dr. Sarvis? I'm just curious, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I've received communication on a topic, it's made all the news blogs, it's been on KEYT, regarding the young man who wants to wear a Marine uniform in graduation. Has that been resolved?
That has not been resolved. We are bringing that to the board for board discussion at your very next meeting next Tuesday night. And I'll be announcing that later when we
Right.
come to agenda items, future agenda items.
Thank you.
Item C2, the announcement of closed session action. There are two items to report out. One is on item B2, a liability claim. It was moved by Cordero and seconded by Noel to reject the liability claim, and that passed 5-0. And then on item B4, the California High School exit exam waiver for graduation for students with disabilities. It was moved by Cordero and seconded by Noel to approve the list of waivers for Casey list of Casey waivers for graduation for students with disabilities, and that passed 5-0 also. Item C3, public comments.
We have two. Mrs. Zabaka, she wants to talk on D17, and Lane Wheeler on public comment. Excuse me, followed by Kate Smith.
Good evening. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. My name is Catherine Abarca. I am a preschool teacher at an county inclusion preschool, and I'm also a vice president of the Special Education Advisory Council. The IDEA includes two fundamental requirements: that a child will receive free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. On D17 tonight, you're going to be talking about the job description for the special education, I guess they're called kind of coordinators. My concern is that there's language in that says more restrictive. And I know that some people think that job descriptions don't mean too much, but to me they really do, because they actually outline what this person's going to be doing and what their goals might be. Anyone in special education, when they see the words more restrictive, it's an automatic red flag. So I know that probably it might be a typo. We don't know where the job description came from. I would just like to take it to everybody's attention that it says more restrictive, and that's something that parents get very upset about. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is it Lane Wheeler next?
Lane Wheeler, followed by Kate Smith, followed by Corey Bream.
Thank you, Lane Wheeler, President of the Santa Barbara Teachers Association. Today I'm wearing pink to show respect for all of the employees, certificated employees that have received pink slips, and those temporary employees who have been given the notice that their contracts will not be renewed for next year. We are in a critical time in our state. I know you're aware of this. May 19th is a very important special election, an unusual time, but it calls for action. I have come to you once before and brought you the language from the California Teachers Association asking for support of all propositions 1A through 1F. I am here today to seek a compromise and seek your support as public servants and as protectorates of the educational institutions here in Santa Barbara, and asking you to step forward and show support for propositions 1A and 1B. If you cannot find a constituency amongst yourselves to support all of the initiatives or all the propositions, I would ask you to do that much. Those are specific to education. They talk about the rainy day fund and then repaying education the $9.3 billion as soon as the state's economy is able to support that. As you know, and several of you board members have been on long enough to know that California has had its ups and downs. And when it's great economy, we are trying to figure out where to spend the money. But when times are tough as they are now, we're laying people off, we're cutting programs, and that's not the way to run a business, whether it's education, public schools, or a private institution. I would call on you today to step forward in a spirit of collaboration with the Teachers Union and many others in the state of California, on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, to support propositions 1A and 1B, and I look forward to seeing some sort of a letter of statement of support from the board in that action very, very soon, before the May 19th election is over. So I ask you to support education, do your jobs, and come forth in that area. Thank you.
Mrs. Smith, followed by Mrs. Bream.
Members of the Santa Barbara Board of Education, my name is Kate Smith. I hope you'll vote no on propositions 1E and 1D. Our Board of Supervisors and our City Council have asked our community to vote no on those two propositions. For 12 years, I've come before you to make accusations of illegal, unethical, and uncivil activities. I'm now coming before you to make accusations of immoral activity. I ran for the school board, and in my candidate statement, I vowed to expose wrongdoing. I vowed to expose school corruption, and so I have. Please visit sbschooltalk.com there is a call to action by ACLU, NAACP, Marian Wright Edelman's Children's Defense Fund. They are calling the Truancy and Parent Accountability Program Institutionalized Racism and Child Abuse. It started here with Bill Cerrone, Mike Kasten, Diana Rigby, and DA Tom Snedden, and it morphed into the school to prison pipeline. There is a rally in Washington, D.C. on May 16th. It is the anniversary of Brown versus Board of Education. There is segregation and institutionalized racism in our schools. On SB School Talk, you can read the dozens of books, hundreds of policy papers, thousands of articles and videos describing the state of education in the United States as corrupt. And I have announced there is an education politico-industrial complex that has gripped our nation's school system. The administration has self-aggrandized, it has disconnected from its mission to educate, and it punishes, incarcerates, brutalizes, and traumatizes our children.
30 seconds, Mrs. Smith.
The South Coast Gang Task Force Leadership Council called our children mosquitoes. They called for vector control. There is systematic and systemic violations of IDEA, ADA, and FERPA. I accused the South Coast Gang Task Force Leadership Council of treason. They are betraying our children and the public trust.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
You will be held accountable. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Bream.
Hi, I come as the Special Ed Advisory Council President tonight. For those in the audience, it's a group of parents who organized together to talk about the special ed issues. Let's just put it in a broad spectrum as issues. So this is mostly about special ed. We've been meeting without the board present, so I thought I'd give you a couple of updates. We have somewhat started organizing a vision meeting with Dr. Sarvis so that all parents can come and voice an opinion on what it should look like to them in any way. And at that time, hopefully, we'll be able to give the FCMAT report and somewhat talk openly about that. We are working on an agenda to present the Hayden results, which are the training of the aides from a behavioral specialist at Washington Elementary. They've been taking data, and the data is pretty impressive, so we're working on bringing that information to you. It's a very positive light and might be able to be used towards the revamping of the system, at least hopefully. And then we have talked previously about starting the aides one day early so that it's not such a hectic first day of school. And I've gotten some good response back to that and would like to offer that we can also organize some training for the aides that's appropriate on integration. We have organized an integration training kind of setup for Adams Elementary School, May 6, 1:30 to 3. We have 3 different speakers. One is a teacher who believes in integration and is going to come and kind of show how to do it. But of course, the talk will start with someone from SELPA giving a little bit of the law on why it's come about and why it's a more commonplace thing at this point in time. So there are 3 speakers planned. Hopefully they're short enough to fit in that time period. I'm under the impression via email today that either Dr. Alan Hilton or Rick Nargi will be attending, which is great because if it goes well and it's well received, hopefully it can be done at other schools. At least that's the intention, is can we fine tune it a little bit here and present it elsewhere and get things a little bit more organized. Those are some of the things we've worked on. We also are breaking our committee apart and trying to get people to go to each elementary school first, of course, and then junior high to find out a list of what they want and need. With the FCMAT report being that there's such low morale, I think a good way to repair that somewhat is to hear what these individual teachers, resource teachers, special day class teachers are wanting and needing on a financial level. And it's interesting, they've come back with the most interesting items. I've only interviewed 3 schools so far, and some of it is $100, $200 kind of things. And anyway, you get the idea. It's pretty surprising, and I will forward that list of wants and needs. It would be great with the new money coming down for special ed if you could segregate maybe $2,000 per school and at least allow these teachers to feel heard and get some of those products to them that they need. An example of one thing that surprised me was a seat cushion for $25. You know, so they're not really asking for the world, and I think it would be nice to feel heard and would repair some of that. Those issues. How about that? We'll be vague. Thank you very much. I have more to share, and we're doing a lot of things. It'd be great if we could get more involved, and it would be even better if our special ed interim directors would help us with these interviews and create more camaraderie.
All right, we will move on to acceptance of donations, item C4.
Move to accept with appreciation.
Second.
All right, I'm going to call that as Mrs. Deacon for the second. That was a tie. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And that passes unanimously. Moving on to the consent agenda. First of all, we are pulling item D28, which is the approval of the contract award to Dahl Air Conditioning for child development, heating, ventilating, and air conditioning replacement at Peabody Charter School, I believe because there's a bid protest. And board members, anything else to pull? Dr. Noel.
I'd like to pull D3, D6, and D17.
D3, D6, and item D17. Any others? Is there a
Can I ask a question on D5?
D5?
Mr. Gonzalez?
Yes, Mr. Gonzalez?
In your write-up, it still says that there were no reviews done, but I'm presuming this is back before us because reviews were done, but the write-up says they weren't.
That is correct. There was no reviews, and as I indicated, there's a board brief with a further explanation that should arrive that says that the county board informed us that this is an information item only. However, it is to be presented to the board. In addition to D5, what you may have noticed is a revision of the previous quarterly report. Information reached us late, and that's now the corrected copy.
And what is the facilities problem that was outlined there?
It has to do with the maintenance facilities at the Santa Barbara Community Academy.
And I guess I'm still confused. It says no reviews were made, but then in the letter it says the purpose of the visits, as specified in the code, was to determine. I mean, how can you not have a visit but still make a report?
It's a quirk in the regulations put out by the California Department of Education. The county tells us that they actually only visit once a year, but the law requires us quarterly reports.
Would you like to pull this item, Mr. Herron?
Yeah, I'd like to let her say we didn't make a visit. I mean, I don't like to see that.
Well, let's go ahead and pull this and we can have further
Okay,
discussion later.
okay.
D5 is pulled. Is there a motion on the rest of the items?
I'd like to pull
Oh.
D15, again, a simple question, and also D26.
D26. Okay. Yes, D5 is pulled.
Right, can I just then have, this will be a quick question on D2.
Okay.
It has to do with the San Marcos fundraiser, and I'm wondering, I noticed that they're selling donuts. It is before school, and it's to staff only, but I'm just wondering have we made any attempts to try to get some of the even before and after school fundraisers to be focused on healthy choices?
Absolutely. In fact, even my secretary will catch some of these sometimes, and she'll send it back and say, you know, we really can't do that. It's not in line with our wellness policy, and we'll suggest other things. this, because it was staff, it's a little bit of an exception. But I will say something to,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Did you want to pull that item? Or
I don't,
I want to go into any further discussion about it.
yeah,
so-
I wasn't asking to
You-
pull it,
okay.
I just wanted
All
some
right.
clarification on that.
All right, let's get a motion to approve the rest of the consent agenda.
Move to approve?
Cordero
Second.
and Deacon. All those in favor?
Aye.
Passes unanimously. Okay, we will now move to item E1 on the action agenda, the second reading and approval of the fiscal solvency plan.
Well, we went over this at our last meeting, and as the board knows, we've collected up ideas from throughout the district, and what you see before you are those ideas. There's been considerable refinement to many of them, and Eric Smith, our deputy superintendent, will make the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. On April 14th, the board was presented with the first reading of the fiscal solvency plan. At that time, we identified that we needed to make $3 million in expenditure reductions to produce a balanced budget for the 9-10 fiscal year. I also noted that at that point in time, that illustrated a best-case scenario that in the event that the initiatives on the May 19th ballot failed and/or the state's economic condition continued to deteriorate, we may be faced with more cuts. At this point, we've taken comments as of the April 14th meeting, both from staff and also from board members' comments at that meeting, refined the plan, and I'd like to walk through the various refinements in the plan rather than go line by line like I did last time. So if I could call your attention to the plan, if we could start with page.
Before you start, Mr. Smith, I'm just going to make a last call for public comments on this item. We're closing to public comments at this time, so if you can get your speaker slips in, that would be great.
I think there's.
There are slips on the back table to fill out if you want to talk. It's the worst. Oh,
They're
I've
in.
got them all.
We've got them.
Okay, thank you. If I could call your attention to page 6 of the plan, there was an additional bullet that was added to the plan assumptions. And what that stated is the flexibility granted for class size, K3 class size reduction, and also the tier 3 categoricals is for 4 years in nature. So at the end of fiscal year 2012-2013, presumably those categoricals will go back to being restricted and no longer be unrestricted. And I just wanted the board to have that knowledge relative to some of the things that are proposed in the plan. If we move on to page 9, there was a refinement there relative to proposing an indirect cost rate be charged to local donations. Right now, we don't charge indirect cost rates, even though we still incur the same amount of incidental paperwork relative to personnel, accounting, payroll, purchasing that we do with any other restricted funding source. We realize that charging indirect on all donations may cripple some of the very small donations. And since we do charge indirect cost on the last day of the fiscal year, we can look at the accumulated value of dollars from one single donor. So what we did was basically created a tier, which would basically said anything above $5,000. I know there's been some discussion relative to capital projects that may be in the works right now and maybe holding those in abeyance or grandfathering them. And obviously that's something we could live with. I would like to look at prospectively, though, having indirect cost rates charged against those projects because they are still a considerable amount of impact and burden on staff. On page 11, there's actually 2 amendments to the plan from the April 14th meeting. One on property rentals. You remember we had a bifurcated rate schedule there where we had 10% increase for Civic Center and then we had a 20% for pools. We've refined that and just suggested 15% across the board. As you will see, some of the values, the monetary values, depending on what the proposals are, some have went up, some have went down, but I think they all balance out more or less. We also had an original proposal on page 11 under item J of charging the ASB bookkeepers 100% ASB. We've toned that down back to 50%. If you move to page 13, which is item R, which is to charge students for parking at comprehensive high schools, through some reconnaissance of Dave Hetjonk and his staff, we were able to identify the number of parking spaces, student parking spaces at each comprehensive high school at a rate of $35 per semester based on the number of parking spaces. We basically identified that we could generate roughly $69,650. Obviously, there's some logistical aspects that would have to be worked out with the site administrators if the board elected to implement that proposal. On page 15, under item W, which is staff all comprehensive high schools at parity, we made that language there clear. I wanted to state that last year, through a collaborative negotiation of San Marcos High School staff, SPTA, and the district administration, we basically reduced the amount there in half, but it was half for 1 year only. So the expense to the district was only $330,000 more than the other two comprehensive high schools for this fiscal year, but it will revert to the higher number going into 9-10. And since that's the actual figure and that's the budget year that the board is contemplating, that's why it's written. We do understand that there is a compromise being worked out right now, but since we don't have final numbers, we're letting this stand the way it is. Eliminate secondary AB 1802 counselors on Y. We tried to refine some of that as well. Obviously, we identified that there's carryover funds involved relative to the funding of some of those counselors, and also through some research we did today, there are potentially 3 unrestricted counselors that would accrue as a cost savings to the district depending on the outcome of the hearings and how those positions fall out. So we think there might be another $246,000 there in savings, but we can't say for certain that that will actually occur. So we're not listing that, and we're just going with the $270,000 as identified. If we move to page 18, you can see per a board member's request, item HH, eliminate athletic trainers, was moved up into the consideration tier. And then under item II, eliminate the district's contribution to the cafeteria fund. I had been requested to do this once before, which is a discussion relative to the merits of giving the cafeteria fund their meals for needy dollars rather than retaining it in the unrestricted general fund. On one hand, you could look at that as an accounting treatment. On another hand, you could look at it as a shift in philosophy. The Meals for Needy add-on, the origin is a permissive override that existed prior to Prop 13, which was specifically targeted for students of low income. And basically, you could make a compelling argument that that money belongs there. However, through the mechanics of the revenue limit, when it was created in 1982, it was added onto the revenue limit as an unrestricted funding source. So obviously the district has the latitude to use it any way they want. However, the flip side of that is philosophically, should it be going over to the cafeteria fund? And so depending on whether you want to give the money on a revenue limit transfer to the cafeteria fund through an income transfer, you could reduce the encroachment on paper to about $38,000. But if you did it through the interfund transfer, that amount would be in excess of $300,000. You're still giving them the same amount of money. It's the way you do it, and it's basically the philosophy of the board. So those are the items that have been modified since the April 14th meeting. I know that Dave Hetjonk has basically enumerated all those in a spreadsheet, and I think he has also identified the items that you'd put an X next to at the last board meeting. And Dave, if you could bring that up, and then unless there's any questions, I'll turn this over to the board president.
I guess the one thing that it's not in your narrative, but it is on the Exhibit A, which is the 9th grade class size reduction for language arts, which you did break out.
I should probably mention that on Exhibit A, basically several of those items have continuums where you can look at a range of cost savings. Sometimes they're not explicit in the narrative, but we did that on purpose to give the board the flexibility to look at various options.
Okay. Well, board members, of course, this is a process that we've become all too familiar with. We've been doing it every year for quite a while. It's always very, very difficult. We need to make $3 million in cuts. We do have lots of public comment on this item. The first thing I would like to do, however, is based on our discussion from the last meeting and things that I know that you've all been thinking about over the past 2 weeks, is there are some items, I believe, that board members would like to just completely take off the table. Items that we absolutely will not do, we will not implement. And so I would like to see, if you look over your list, if there is a motion to eliminate some group of items that are things that you think you can get a consensus on, that are sort of easy to address right off the bat. Dr. Noel.
Madam President, I for one would like to hear from the public before making those kinds of decisions.
I understand, and we can always come back and rescind a vote, but this is about things that would be taken off the table, and it would make a huge difference in terms of people having the amount of time to speak if there are things that we're simply not going to do, if we already know that we're not going to do that.
Well, I don't understand the difference between what you said now or after they finish speaking. It's
Yeah, Mrs. Cordero?
I'm sorry.
Mr. Herron?
I would like to remove item Z and item H, capital H, small h. I'll move to remove Z and capital H. Z is the Washington Gate issue, and HH is the athletic trainer issue.
I'll second that.
All right. Are there any desires to amend? These are ones that we will absolutely not implement. Any additions that anybody would like to make an amendment?
I'd like to make an amendment. I would also like to take off the table item D, instituting parent pay transportation, and item double C, discontinue freshman athletics.
All right. Is there a second for that amendment?
I would like to keep D separate because I have a little different view on that.
Me too.
All right. Mrs. Deacon, would you like to amend just to include
I can do that.
double C?
I will amend to include only double C.
Is there a second on that?
I'll second.
All right. Right now, we're just going to take a vote on the amendment to add that to the main motion. All those in favor?
Could you repeat
Right.
the exact wording of the amendment?
The amendment is to add double C, discontinue freshman athletics at each high school, to the main motion of items that we will not implement, which at this point are double H and Z. Any discussion on that, just on the amendment only? All right, all those in favor of adding double C?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay, that passes 4-1. And now we will, are there any further discussion on the main motion, which now is to eliminate double H, double C, and Z? And hopefully, those are all visible up there on the screen. And maybe, Mrs. Deacon, you want to turn down the lights a little bit so that's more visible for members of the public?
I'd like to amend to add X, eliminate 9th grade class size reduction.
Completely eliminate 9th grade class size reduction? This is taking it off the table so that it's no longer something that we could look at. Is there a second for that?
I would amend it, but I guess we need a second.
We can do that separately. I want to keep this kind of, all right, well, that amendment's
Okay.
going to die for lack of a second. Any other discussion on this? All right, all those in favor?
Would you repeat?
Yes.
I think it's very important to
Yes,
make
I'll
a
repeat
very
it.
clear record of what
The
we're voting.
motion is to completely remove from consideration the implementation of double H, eliminate athletic trainers at each comprehensive high school, double C, discontinue freshman athletics at each high school, and Z, eliminate second grade gifted and Talented Education Identification Assessment. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I abstain.
And one abstention. Okay, it passes 4-0 with one abstention. Dr. Noel?
I simply think that we should be voting on these things one at a time.
I understand.
don't like the group voting, and that's why I abstained.
Okay. Now, we will go ahead and take public comment at this time. I would ask you, because there's so many speakers, if you wanted to speak to double H, double C, or Z, and you agree with what the board has already done, I would ask that you that you waive your chance to speak so that other people can have more opportunities. And so maybe, Mr. Herron, you can go through and see the ones that have identified themselves so that we can figure out how much time we can give people to speak.
I don't see, these are all answered, I think. Those- no, those-
Okay. I'm going to call the names of people that I think may wish to withdraw their speakers form since based on our previous action. So when I call your name, if you would just let me know if you want to speak or not. Abe, Dan, and Nan are APs. No. Okay, thank you. Mr. Holstein? No. Thank you. Dr. Graham Hurwitz? No. Thank you. Dr. Dan Cravioto? No. Thank you. Char Van Dak? Oh, I'm sorry, Vandell. Thank you. Brian Linden? No. Thank you. Dr. Christopher Proctor? No. Thank you. Karen Anderson? No. Thank you. Kyle Shotwell? No. Thank you. Brian Joseph and Kyle Miller? No. Thank you. Chuck Ebner? No. Thank you. And Neil Myers? Yes? Okay.
One more.
And David Shapiro? Yes. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Herron, how many speaker slips do we have?
Was that yes to withdraw or yes to speak?
Yes to speak.
Yes to speak.
19.
19. 2 minutes each? Okay. All right, speakers, normally we allow 20 minutes for public comment on an item. Obviously, there are so many people that we want to give the opportunity to speak on this that we will extend the time with no board objection to 40 minutes. There are about 20 speakers, and you'll get 2 minutes each. So if Mr. Smith would make that adjustment. And Mr. Herron is going to call off the first 3 names, if you can be prepared to go up to the microphone, and we'll get rolling.
Mr. Myers, followed by Dr. Pomerantz, followed by Lee McCoy.
Thank you very much for the time to speak. First of all, you guys have a difficult job, and you're going to hear a lot of comment. I appreciate the work you're doing to try and figure out how to make this all balance. I'm here to talk about the water polo community and the proposal to increase the pool fees, which I understand, if I've got this correctly, is by 15%. So it doesn't seem like a lot of money. The water polo, I'm here representing the water polo board. We're a nonprofit. We have 200 families participate, I guess about 400 kids in the pool, the vast majority of whom are in the school district. And 15% doesn't seem like much, but that's actually more than the income for the club itself. So we're going to have to make adjustments as a result of that. We currently have 25 families that we support by scholarship, and that's probably going to be the hardest thing for us, is to figure out how to make that adjustment. Given the shortfall you have, it's not reasonable to ask that you don't make any cuts, but really the reason I'm here is just to ask that you keep in mind that the program is a good program and that we're going to have some pretty severe shortfalls if, in fact, it goes very far. And I'm hoping you'll find a way to keep it at less than 15%. So that's really it. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on, but thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. Dr. Pomerantz, followed by Lee McCoy, followed by Dr. Lavender.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is Dr. Mark Pomerantz. I'm a Washington parent with 3 children. I'm here tonight to speak on item which was EE of the proposed solvency plan, which will increase the K through 3 class size. Within the item, you'll be deciding whether to raise the class size from 20 to 25 or somewhere in between. And I'm here to ask you to consider limiting the increase to 22. 2 weeks ago, at the last regularly scheduled meeting, the idea of increasing class size was discussed, and it seems like it's going to be an inevitable cut, despite the clear opposition voiced over the last month through public comments by parents and teachers alike. I want to remind everybody of a point that Dr. Noel made. He emphasized the fact that there's going to be hard decisions to make, and that these decisions are going to need to be based ultimately on values and on what components of our children's education that we deem the most important. It's my strong opinion that if we as a community are going to compromise during these difficult economic times, we don't undermine the quality of K through 3 by overwhelming teachers with large class size and leave them with insufficient hours of aides. Providing quality education during the first years of children's lives gives them a big jump start on reading, writing, and the ability to learn.
30 seconds.
And we all know that pays out long-term dividends. The most significant cost savings occurs when we increase to 22 students. As a physician and businessman for the last 25 years, it's clear to me that going beyond that is diminishing returns, and that can equal unintended economic consequences. And so I just want to emphasize, consider decreasing to 22 students. You'll decrease $400,000 on your budget, and you'll have a good compromise. I think that'll make most parents and teachers happy.
Thank you, Dr. Pomerantz.
Thank you.
Lee McCoy, followed by Dr. Lavender, followed by Ellie Iverson.
Dr. Sarvis, members of the board, my name is Lee McCoy. I'm an attorney here in town and the father of a high school senior in the district. I previously served the district on the advisory council for GATE and worked as the vice chair of that committee for 1.5 years. I'm not here to talk about GATE tonight. I think there's another issue that's facing the board that's even more important than GATE. We've heard a lot in the last couple of weeks about a nasty pipeline at work in our schools. So I want to talk about a more positive pipeline that's at work, and that's the high school guidance counselor. I believe the high school guidance counselor serves as a pipeline to the services that we provide our students. Without the guidance counselors, services that students can't access are of no value. And I have some personal experience I want to share with you. My daughter was a freshman. She met with the guidance counselor, and the guidance counselor mapped out the class schedule all the way through senior year to get to college. All the GATE students, GATE classes, the AP classes that would be the ones she needed, and it's quite a maneuver to get all of that done, giving the prerequisites, because you can't do everything in the order you would like to. And so she spent a lot of time with doing that. She brought my wife and I into the meeting so that we were all on the same page. And so we had a plan from freshman year how to get my daughter to her dream school. She wanted to go to UCLA, and so we had that all mapped out, ready to go. Sophomore year came, and my daughter started having some health problems. She could no longer sit through the regular classrooms. And
30 seconds.
I beg your pardon, caused all kinds of problems for her. We didn't go to the teachers. We didn't go to the assistant principal. We went to the guidance counselor, who acted as a case manager. She did all of the work for us and troubleshooted that so that we got a 504 accommodation, got my daughter into home hospital, and she's now graduating on target for her goals. And I can tell you none of that would have happened without the guidance counselor. So when you make these hard decisions you have to make, please remember the positive pipeline to progress that's happening in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Lofhander, Ellie Iverson, followed by Kim Barron.
Well, hello everybody. So I'm Dr. Lavander, and just to be clear, I'm not a medical doctor, so if you get the flu, don't come to me. So I have a PhD in science and engineering, and so I have been teaching and instructing on and off for 20 years or so. So I know from first-hand experience how important it is to connect with students and have good order in the classroom and in the group. So therefore, I want to support keeping classes as small as possible. So I just want to say then that, well, I'm here then as a parent of 2 kids, one who's going to start soon and one who's already in school. And I'm here as a taxpayer and a voter, and I want to encourage you all to try to find other cuts than to increase class sizes. And if it's not possible, try to keep class sizes as small as possible for the youngest kids, where we make a good impression on them when they start. So, thank you very much.
Ms. Iverson, followed by Ms. Barron, followed by Ms. Miyazaki.
Good evening, school board members. My name is Ellie Iverson, and I am currently ASB Vice President of Santa Barbara High School. Now, I'd like to start off by acknowledging the fact that in today's modern society, we view education as a business. And I also understand that the school board needs to regulate and control this business, which is why these budget cuts are so important to us. But at the same time, I also hope that you ran for office because you believe in a higher education for the youth. Now, if this is the case, then I think you should see the importance behind having effective counseling in high schools, effective counseling in junior highs, because it is this counseling that leads to higher education for the low income, for the students that don't have the opportunity to get counseling on their own. It leads for opportunities for students to get into the college that they want to, with help from counseling staff at the high schools. I feel that it's extremely important that we keep the staff we have because it's already so underbooked that we have at Santa Barbara High School lists of students lined up to get into counseling offices that they can't because they need to wait a few days so that they can have an opening in their schedules to even see these students because it's so booked. And so many people need this advice from their counselors in order to get into higher education. So I hope that you recognize the situation and vote against not allowing counselors to continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Barron, followed by Ms. Miyazaki, followed by Mr. Burrows.
Good evening. I'm also here to ask you not to increase class size beyond what is absolutely necessary. As a parent and a teacher, I teach second grade. It's so clear that the smaller we can keep the class sizes, the better. And I also think there's a lot of confusion in the community, and I think we would like to know if if you do intend to increase class size, and then we do get stimulus money from the government, and if Proposition 1B does pass, are you going to rescind the class size increase? And if not, what are you going to do with that money? And I hope that you speak to that because I think there's a lot of confusion about the money that possibly may be coming in. So anyway, I ask you to keep class size as small as possible. Thank you.
Ms. Miyazaki, followed by Mr. Burrows, followed by, I have a feeling, Mr. Marino. Oh, by Jim Marino.
I submitted 2 forms to speak for. Would you mind telling me which one I would be speaking about?
This just says San Marcos High School.
Oh, okay. My name is Aya Miyazaki. I'm the current ASB president at San Marcos High School, and I wanted to talk about the issue with the parking. Of charging students $70 a year for parking.
Can I stop you 1 second? Did you say you put in 2?
Yeah.
You need to talk about both of them in the same 3-minute period.
Okay, then I'll
2-minute period.
I'll take one out.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sorry. My issue with that is currently all 3 or 2 high schools charge for parking, and all that money goes to ASB. So by charging $70, either our schools would have to charge more on top of the $70 to get money to come back to the ASB, which funds for student, and the rest of the money would go to the district. Also, by charging $70 a year, I was wondering, does that take away from students who aren't able to afford this? And doesn't that take away from or equality in schools and kind of having the haves and the have-nots involved? And I also wanted to mention that, with the $70 a year, is this money? This money doesn't benefit the students directly. It goes to the district, and I don't believe that this money would be necessary because I think you wanted to have this money for repaving and whatnot, but that does not need to happen every year at our schools. And so I'm strongly against parking in, or charging $70 a year for parking. I believe in equality with every student and giving them the opportunity to use our school property. Thank you.
Mr. Burrows by Mr. Marino by Mr. Latham.
Good evening. My name is Eric Burrows. I teach social studies at San Marcos High School. As a history teacher, I believe in the importance of history in order to make any difficult decision as you're facing. A brief review of the history, I think, will also separate the parity issue at the high schools from the block schedule issue. There's been a lot in the media regarding the block schedule and the parity issue, putting them together. I think that historical review will help. 15 years ago, when we went to the block schedule, for those first 12 years, San Marcos was funded, staffed at parity with the other high schools, with a 32 average per class size for students in a classroom. Given the magic and wonder of the block schedule, we were able to make that work at San Marcos High School. Now, both the district and the union 3 years ago went to a cap, not an average on class size. That went to 35 for the two other high schools, and for the first time, a differentiated amount went to San Marcos High School at 31 as a cap for class size. Now, when the budget crisis hit, the district came to San Marcos, and immediately San Marcos responded. And under the guidance of Dr. Sarvis and Eric Smith, we resolved that part way last year with a compromise where we voluntarily at San Marcos High School went to 33 as a class cap for students, losing 5 to 7 employees in the process. Again, this year, when we're looking at budget cuts, the parity is very important. We at San Marcos hope that the board and the district appreciates the voluntary nature of what we did last year to suffer those cuts in order to assist the district and save librarians and psychologists, amongst others. And then also appreciate the willingness in San Marcos this year.
10 seconds.
That we would hope that, given this situation, that the board simply take off this budget, the fiscal item, take this out of here as a good faith measure, and recognize the fact that San Marcos will get to parity with the other high schools. We have that proposal in front of the district staff right now that we move to 35. We hope that can go through with district and board approval so that we maintain San Marcos High School as the special school it is.
Thank you. Jim Marino, followed by Reg Latham, followed by Amy Ranzelhoff.
Superintendent Jarvis, members of the board, I'm Jim Marino. I'm a local attorney, former police officer. I've lived in this community for 57 years. I'm a product of Santa Barbara schools, as are my children. My youngest two are in the 8th grade at La Colina. They've been looking forward to going to San Marcos and the block scheduling program there, which is an alternative, a very good one for many junior high school kids who want to do that. I see here at the 11th hour, the block scheduling has now come up in your gun sights. I don't know why it comes up so late, but it's something as significant as the block scheduling shouldn't be dealt with in a sort of throw mud at the wall and see if it'll stick sort of an approach. It needs to be studied to make a change as great as that. I think that needs to be done before you consider simply eliminating it as if it were some line item thing in the budget you could X out. I want to say that abandoning the block scheduling simply as a budget item is not a good idea, that you should consider it and study it very carefully. I know that there are probably hundreds, just like my two youngest children, who are looking forward to the block scheduling program, and I don't think you should just treat it in that manner. I read about it in the paper. That's the only reason I'm down here today, is it came up. I think I read something about one of the board members saying it really didn't represent the kind of reduction you thought it would. So I'd like you to be very, very careful before you talk about eliminating that program. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Latham, followed by Ms. Ranzahoff, followed by Ms. Cooper.
Dr. Sarvis and board members, if you could do me a favor and clarify, because when I was looking at the list that was on the screen, I couldn't find the line item about the Luke staff benefits. Is that included in that?
That is not on our Exhibit A. That is in our section on cost items that were cost savings that were considered, but probably would not yield cost savings in the short term.
So is not on the block?
Well, it's not on this list. Board members are always free to bring forward items from other sections on.
Should we address it just to save time?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then I have a handout. I'm here tonight representing the Board of Directors of the Marjorie Luke Theater. Robin Sonner, one of our board members, is here, and Bryn Crow, our co-chair. We just brought a fact sheet for you, which addresses the impact of this proposed, if it is a proposed cut. I wanted to just summarize the things that are on the sheet, and I'll let you read them in detail later. But SIPAC, which is the nonprofit organization that operates the Marjorie Luke Theater, has an agreement with the high school district, which is renewed each 5 years. That agreement supports and includes covering the benefits for our two main employees, our manager and our technical director. It's important that you note and understand that we pay their full salaries, which comes to about $117,000 a year. The district pays their benefit package, which comes to about $24,000 a year. The Luke donates and raises approximately close to approaching $1 million every year to support the Luke, which directly supports the district and the junior high. Our staff supports the junior high directly. The benefits far, far, far outweigh the cost to the district, and I hope that you'll consider not considering that on the chopping block, and this sheet will explain the further details. Thank you.
Ms. Ranzahoff, followed by Ms. Cooper, followed by Mrs. Jacobs.
Good evening. My name is Amy Ranzahoff, and I am the board representative from San Marcos High School. And I'm speaking on behalf of the ASB government from Dos Pueblos, San Marcos, and Santa Barbara High Schools. Please refer to item letter J. This particular item proposes the Santa Barbara High School District to charge the ASB government of each high school 50% of the financial technician salary and benefits. The district puts this at a total of $97,496, which would be $32,498 for each school. As you may or may not know, the ASB bookkeeping duties of the financial technician are to objectively and appropriately manage all money brought in by student activities, athletics, performing arts, leadership clubs, and school organizations. So what does this mean? The financial technician at each high school takes care of our money. They take care of us so we can make a high school what it is. Yes, academics are the priority, but what makes a high school the community it is the vast amount of co-curricular activities that we help to create, administer, and control. For all ASB activities, we the students either fundraise or charge ourselves for those events. To ask us to charge ourselves or fundraise an additional $32,498 per school to run these activities would simply mean these activities would not exist, such as prom, homecoming, athletic events, and so on. Lastly, according to California Education Code 48937, the governing board of any school district shall provide for the supervision of all funds raised by any student body or student organization using the name of the school.
20 seconds.
So according to the state ed code, the district is required to provide us staff member to supervise ASB funds. It's inappropriate for the ASB to be in charge of their own funds, and to prevent any mismanagement from the inside, we need the district to provide an outside source. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Cooper, followed by Ms. Jacobs, followed by Lane Wheeler.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity tonight to speak. My name is Judy Cooper. I have a graduate of San Marcos High School, a current student at San Marcos High School, and an 8th grader going to San Marcos High School. I'm one of these involved parents. I've served in various capacities with the PTSA, with athletics, with the Gate Site Council, and I'm here just to speak on behalf of so many of my friends and so many families, many of whom are here and many of whom couldn't be here, who support the block system. I had some things prepared, but I think some of the other speakers have already eloquently expressed some points of view. I don't have very much time. The issue of parity, I think, in many ways is a red herring, because I understand and appreciate that there will likely be a compromise that will get to staffing parity. But parity isn't really applicable if you look at programming, resources, and facilities of our 3 high schools, of our area high schools. And so I would just encourage you to look at parity in its larger context and look at, what some schools have and what other schools don't have. And all of us could make an argument at one time or another that our school has something that the other school doesn't have and vice versa. I was at a meeting yesterday where we were trying to figure out how we were going to host our Channel League swimming prelims and finals at the pool when our pool and pool deck is so small. So, if you want to talk about parity, there's a lot of ways to talk about it. The real bottom line,
30
though,
seconds.
Thank you, is that I'm concerned that every year this issue comes up. I've been at San Marcos a long time, and every year, right around this time of year, this issue of taking the block system off the table comes up, and it becomes kind of a poison, and there's a big rumor mill that happens, and it's hard to have a really positive educational environment when our teachers are concerned and our students are concerned and our families are concerned. And more importantly, it's hard to attract and retain students and teachers to what I believe is a great high school. And so I just really ask you to look forward. We're all concerned about our kids' education, and it's hard with uncertainty in our future to have a really positive outlook on the future. So I just ask for your consideration with respect to keeping the block system and not having it come up every year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, Ms. Jacobs, but I just noticed you're E2, not E1. I'm sorry. You have to wait another hour and a half, probably. Got your pillow, I'm sure. Mr. Wheeler, followed by Mr. Bradford, followed by Kate Smith.
Lane Wheeler, Santa Barbara Teachers Association. I would just concur with what Mr. Smith said earlier. There is a proposal regarding parity at San Marcos High School in the works. I have to commend the staff at San Marcos High School, particularly the certificated staff, who have once again come to the rescue wearing their white hats and their royal uniforms to provide a resolution to an issue that has been discussed and talked about now going on for 2 years. I don't want to outline all the details here this evening because of the number of speakers that are coming up, but I do want to let you know that I believe we will have a proposal that will be moving forward in a very expedient fashion, and hopefully it will be something that the board can look on. And I would ask you at this time to remove the parity issue off of the cut list right now until we have some resolution to provide for you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Bradford, followed by Mrs. Smith. And I have Adrian Shuley, but I have a feeling she may not want to talk. See her? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Herron, members of the board. I'm Paul Bradford, 30-year South Coast resident, parent of a junior at San Marcos, and am admittedly underinformed. I was on the track at a meet against Buena about an hour and a half ago when a fellow volunteer said, hey, they're considering doing away with the block program, and I thought, okay, I'll come down and give you my 2 cents. I can't talk numbers because I haven't looked at the myriad of choices you're making. I can only comment from my son's perspective. My son is a junior, struggled in junior high school, and has flourished. I mean flourished under the block program. And as you weigh numbers, weigh Evan and weigh the other kids that are in the block program that are flourishing because of that particular nature. We were drawn to the block program because of its inherent value and its inherent different approach on preparing kids for post-high school life. Done no informal surveys, just talked with a number of teachers, and I've talked with parents, and I've not found one parent who says, I wish we were not here at the block at San Marcos High with the block program. So again, as you weigh a myriad of stats and numbers, keep Evan in mind, and that kid is doing really well because of the block program. Thank you.
Kate Smith, followed by David Shapiro.
Members of the Board of Education. The Santa Barbara News Press had an article on Santa Barbara High School's Susan Snyder, a counselor, and her work with a Latina student who has been offered full scholarships to 3 of the top schools in the country. Susan Snyder was my son's counselor, and she's so wonderful that my husband wanted to go back to school. I suggest that you use pupil retention categorical funds to fund the counselors. As it is now, there is $500,000 that are being misappropriated for the gang task force outreach worker, whose job will not be to retain pupils in school, but rather will grab male Hispanics by the scruff of their necks and throw them into the school-to-prison pipeline. An elementary school principal was recently fired for supporting students and refusing to place more than 20 students in her classrooms. She was fired for refusing to do what Superintendent Sarvis demanded. So, this is from Stanford. They had a massive report 2 years ago. The system is essentially unreformable. It works best as a means to transfer wealth from taxpayers to an insatiable bureaucracy. Meaningful reform will only take place when individuals rather than bureaucrats make key decisions and funding goes to the student, not to the institution.
20 seconds, Mrs. Smith.
That choice needs to be extended to parents and students in K-12. Choice will give them the right to, in effect, fire the lot of them and chart their own course. If money alone guaranteed a good education, then Paris Hilton would have a PhD.
Thank you, Mrs. Smith.
My apology to Paris Hilton. It's on SB School Talk. Please read the hundreds of policy papers.
Mr. Shapiro.
Well, I wanted to speak on behalf of Washington Parents for Excellence in Education, which is our group which formed in response to the GATE issue, and I wanted to thank the board for taking that issue off the table. And I won't take up much time tonight, except to say that I know there are other non-budgetary issues that have been percolating. I think Susan Deacon mentioned some, President Parker had some issues, Dr. Davis Hayden had some concerns, and we just want to say that we welcome the opportunity to work with you on these concerns, to address them. We think that we all share the same goal of making the GATE program and education in general at Washington and in the district in general as excellent as possible. So we see ourselves on the same team. We'd like to work with you, and we just ask you to please include us in any types of discussions and dialogue that will happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that concludes the public comment part of this item. Mr. Hetyon, could you go ahead and put Exhibit A back up there? At our last meeting, board members looked at most of the items on this list, and we went through and sort of made a preliminary identifications of ones that we thought were not controversial that we would probably implement, but we took no action on it. And that was marked up there with an X, but I don't see that, Mr. Hetyon. There are the X's. So from our last meeting, you can see that we had sort of discussed A being one that we would implement, that's charge classified salaries. B, disconnect unnecessary local telephone lines. C, charge local donation accounts, the indirect cost rate, that did change.
We probably should take that X off.
Yeah, we should probably take that particular X off. E was recognize licensed children's institutions. F, reduce wireless telephone service. X, continue the lease of Ortega Street campus. K, eliminate outside mandated costs. Preparation consultant. L, eliminate outside medical administrative activities claim preparation consultant. M, suspend the deferred maintenance. N, reduce independent auditors' fees. O, recognize rate reduction for property and liability insurance. P, recycle haul trash for money. Q, power management. T, eliminate 6 teachers on special assignment positions. U, eliminate
I think we meant to take T off. I think X, I don't think X was an adamant.
Okay,
In fact, I think I saw an email.
all right.
Would we consider that?
So would board members like to go ahead and take that off for further discussion?
Which one?
T.
T.
And as I'm saying these, please shout out if there are ones that you want to add on that are new. As soon as I'm through with this list, please also let me know. So T, remove the X. U, eliminate administrative stipends for special assignments. V. V, eliminate expense of leased classrooms and administrative support for home school Santa Barbara. All right, some members have shouted out about ones that are on that list. Are there any other ones that you feel that have an X that? That
We're gonna go to AA.
we will, oh, sorry, I didn't see those yet. AA, eliminate all classified employee stipends. BB, cap the co-curricular stipends. DD, reduce classified support staff. And EE, require students to make up absences for truancy and/or discipline with Saturday school. All right, so
I
first.
just have a question on EE.
Yes, Mr. Heron?
Well, I don't,
I think we
this is,
should take off the X and discuss it.
All right,
mine's from the standpoint of why don't we have more there, but that's, okay.
all right, well, we can take that off. Anything that you want to take off for further discussion, go ahead and do that. Dr. Noel?
Oh, that's what I wanted to ask. Did you just say we've done that with T?
Yes, we took the X off of the T.
Is that the same thing as removing it from the possibility of
No,
being
that
cut?
means that we will discuss it.
I'm sorry, what?
That means we'll take some items.
on the table.
I'm just trying to to see if we can head towards a motion that takes a group of them that are really ones that are not controversial, that we can make a motion on that, and then go line by one on the ones
Okay.
that board members have.
If we could scroll up, I think the very last item, is it II?
I eliminate the district's contribution to the cafeteria
I
fund.
think we could maybe put an X by that one. No.
No, we're going to
Okay.
discuss that further. All right. Would there be a motion from a board member to go ahead and implement the cost savings that are ones that we've identified by X's?
Also move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Well,
Further discussion?
I think in deference to those of us who are far enough away from that screen that's too small a print.
Would you like me to read it off again? We do, everybody
What?
can have a hard copy, but,
Okay. There are no X's on the hard copy.
okay. Would you like
Okay?
me to read off that list again?
And I thought maybe the public might be interested in knowing with a little more precision what we're doing. I
Right.
felt some obligation that we should be clear to them.
So the motion is to implement the budget reductions or cost savings that are listed, that I just verbally read out, that board members agreed on, but I'm happy to read through that list again. Mr. Heron?
As the maker of the motion, let me just make it clear why I made the motion. I think these are items that there's probably no discussion, things that we all agree on, and probably don't warrant much discussion. We should be spending our times on all the other issues that probably are controversial. But these are items that I think there's unanimity that we can do, and it doesn't touch students, and it doesn't touch teachers, and it doesn't touch the classroom. These are things we can do, and we might as well see how much they add up to.
Okay.
Well, my
Further discussion?
quarrel was simply,
Yeah.
I mean, I've raised it last time, that's too small for me to read, and there are no X's on my sheet.
Right.
So it's very hard for me to vote intelligently when I can't read the text. The font's too damn small.
Would you like me to read that off again? Yeah, Mrs. Deacon?
Pardon me?
Is there a way to make it bigger?
Yeah, I mean, surely in this technological era, we could figure out a way to increase the font size.
And I am happy to read it through again.
President Parker, I think that
Yes.
would be a good idea.
All right. I will read it through again. So the motion is to implement the reductions or cost savings, and I'll just wait until they're back up again. You can do it there, yep. All right. So there we go. If you can scroll all the way back up. Okay, so it's for A, charge classified salaries to the PL 94-142 funds. B, disconnect unnecessary local telephone lines. C, charge local donation accounts the indirect cost rate. We removed that X.
We took the X off that C, I think.
Yeah, we did. I think it popped back on again. C should be no X. E, recognize licensed children's institutions. F, reduce wireless telephone service. X, continue lease of, sorry, I keep looking at the X's instead. H, continue lease of Ortega Street campus. K, eliminate outside mandated cost preparation consultant. L, eliminate outside medical administrative activities claim preparation consultant. M, suspend deferred maintenance contribution. N, reduce independent auditor fees. O, recognize rate reduction for property and liability insurance. P, recycle haul trash for money. Q, power management. The X should be removed from T. So that is not included. U, eliminate administrative stipends for special assignments. V, eliminate expense of leased classrooms and administrative support for homeschool Santa Barbara. I'm going to scroll down some more, but not quite so far. There we go. A, eliminate all classified employee stipends not contained in collective bargaining agreements. I think that's double A. I guess the problem is the font. Okay, double A. Then double B, cap the co-curricular stipends contained. I'll just say cap the co-curricular stipends. That's not helping me. Double D, which is reduce classified support staff proportional to enrollment decline.
Back it up.
Double E, which is, oh, and double E should be taken off, the X should be removed from that one. All right.
Under that understanding, I would like to second Mr. Herron's motion.
You know, I think it's already been seconded. All right. With that, any further discussion? All those in favor of implementing these items, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It passes unanimously for those marked items. So now we need to know the total. So now, Mr. Hetjank. So I don't know if that's going to take you some time, Mr. Hetjank. Would you like us to take a brief break? Okay, with board consent, we'll take a 5-minute break for that to be totaled up so we can see what direction we need to go in at this point. Let's see. And Mr. Hetjank has updated the spreadsheet. So you can see that with the list of cuts that we have not gone into deep discussion about, we are counting up. The total now is at $1,148,956. Our target is $3 million, so we have almost $2 million more in cuts to make. And Dr. Sarvis, do you have any comments that you'd like to share?
Well, we have a long ways to go tonight. I would like to speak to the San Marcos parity issue because that's a big item. It's important to know where we stand on that. First of all, let me state that no one is working to dismantle the block schedule. I was surprised to read this morning that I claim the block system costs the district a lot of extra money and that I claim that abolishing it would save us $600,000. That is simply untrue, and I think the foolishness needs to stop right now. This is not about the block schedule. This is about parity in staffing. Those are two very separate issues. The staff is to be credited last year with mitigating the effect of the inequity. And in doing so, I think it's important to note that there were no changes made in the block schedule. It was a separate issue. It is not a block schedule issue. It wasn't last year. It isn't again this year. And I think any attempt to make it a block schedule issue does us a great disservice. Now, we've been working on the issue. We've been working on it. Well, we worked on it last year, as you heard, and as I would be the first to tell you, the staff went a long ways toward mitigating that inequity this last year and really brought back half of the money to us. The staff has again stepped forward, and much to their credit, they've offered a compromise for this year. And that would also save us a significant amount of money. In fact, the way the compromise stands right now, rather than costing the district $660,000, it would reduce that to $230,000, and that would be the difference in staffing between San Marcos and the other two high schools. Now, that is not an effect, and I know, well, negotiations are ongoing. There is no approval to that plan, and in the absence of approval, it remains on the table. I don't think that the board would do its due diligence to say, oh, well, that will probably be approved. I will tell you, I have confidence in the San Marcos staff. I believe that will probably be approved, but you can't make budget decisions based upon that. So the board will really have to have a plan A and plan B, and I would appreciate that, Mr. Smith would appreciate that, so that if other cuts are then enacted tonight and we're able to negotiate some compromise, then we would know what the priority would be in bringing those back, those cuts back. And we would need to know which of those would come back first. So that further extends the night. How's that as an opener?
Thank you.
Can
Yes.
you give those
Mr.
numbers again? Let's make the assumptive approach. If the plan did pass, what would that 660 number become?
It would be 230,000.
Wouldn't it be 430,
No.
wouldn't it?
433.
I'm sorry, you're right.
So-
It would save on this budget the 430. That's right.
I would like, for discussion's sake, to plug that in, and then after we're done, say, okay, and maybe say, okay, what if we
Yes.
didn't get that 430? What would we then do? Although I don't want to
could
put
see doing
San
that.
Marcos in the situation like they were last year of saying, we're under the gun. If we don't do it, we're going to lose librarians. And so I really would like to hear at some point, you know, how firm that number is, if anybody can give us that number. But I'd like to plug the 430 in, and then have.
Well, I would like to take this sort of in the form of a motion. The reality is we can go anywhere, because this isn't decided, and we haven't discussed this, and I don't think there's been any vote on it at this point at the San Marcos site. And so that 230 number is tenuous at this point. We could have anything in the range of complete parity of 663 all the way down to no parity. And we kind of need to address sort of the maximum that the board would like to look for down to 0 in terms of our priority list. So what I would like to propose is if board members can throw out a plan A, which is the maximum parity that they would like to see between the schools, and then we'll build a budget based on plan A. Then we'll go back with a plan B, which would look like if we are not able, if we come to partial or whatever that number may be, partial or no parity with San Marcos, then the first item that we would consider eliminating or extending the amount of savings for would be item whatever it is, and so on down the list. And I know, Mr. Herron, that it's hard because then it does look like a trade-off situation, but the reality is we have to get 3 million, and it is a trade-off situation. It always is, because we have a limited amount of money that we're working with. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I think that in a perfect world, I'd like to see the schools at parity within maybe 3 or 4% of each other. But given where we are, for me, I think the fact that there's been this discussion with the faculty at San Marcos and the administration at San Marcos and the administration at the district, and that this is the number that at least is being considered at this point as something that has been tentatively agreed to by the people who were representing those positions. For me, I would think the 430 savings, which would be to the district from where it currently is what I would like to sort of think of as the maximum. Because I wouldn't want to go back at this point and tell the faculty that we want them to come up with more savings after they've gone through this negotiation process. And then, given that it's not a done deal, however, that we know that it may not, that may not come to fruition, look at what would happen if we didn't get that, and
All right.
if we got various variations on it.
What I would like to hear then is sort of agreement to start on Plan A with a motion we'll address item W first, staff all comprehensive high schools at parity. So a motion to plug a particular number in there. Dr. Noel?
Yes, I move to change the number 663,000 to 430,000.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Okay, and keeping in mind this is Plan A only, we will then take a vote on Plan B. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that passes unanimously, and we will plug, we're just going to go through item by item now.
Can I,
Yes,
just for the
Mrs.
sake of specificity, it's 433,000.
433,000, and I also want to make it really clear that the
Yes,
board,
433, I accept
Yeah.
the correction.
that the board that is in no way an agreement by the board to anything that may be happening in negotiations. That is simply the board at this time assigning a number to item W.
Well, that wasn't what I moved. I just, I mean, I didn't have all that qualifying stuff, I just changed the number.
Right, well, the board, that is what we said.
Okay.
The board is not, we haven't discussed negotiations around San Marcos, and so.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
That's what you meant, I understand.
I just wanted to be really clear on that. All right, so of the remaining list, you see our numbers now up to 1,581,000. Would board members like to address another item on our short list? We can start at the top if you want to do it that way. All right, so going up at the top, the first one was item D, which was Institute Parent Pay Transportation.
No, C.
Oh, sorry.
What is the new number on C?
C, you're right. And the number on C should be at
That's right, okay.
and 32,797. So is there a motion on C?
Well, I'd like to try to make a motion on C. I would like to move that we accept C. However, we grandfather in fundraising projects that are already underway, because I do feel that we can't really change the rules in the middle of the game, and there are some fundraising organizations that have already set a goal and are already fundraising towards that goal. So sorry to go on at length, but that would be my motion.
All right. Is there a second to that
Second.
motion? Dr. Noel seconds it. Further discussion? Mrs. Cordero?
I want to clarify it. Does that mean that we'd grandfather in the donations that have already been received, or any donation from now on for the projects that have already been underway?
The latter.
And that's for board-approved projects,
For board-approved projects.
or board-approved fundraisers, I should state. Any further discussion? All right, we have a motion to accept item C, charge the local donation account, indirect cost rate, except for grandfathering in board-approved fundraisers. Mrs. Cordero?
I had a question on, I don't know if Mr. Smith can give us any ballpark figure as to what you think that would do to this 132.
I mean, if we're talking mostly like capital projects and things of that, none of that's contemplated. The way we calculated it is just looked at the receipts for this year, kind of and last year, and then just applied a 5%. So it's not been spiked by any large capital projects, so I don't think it'll have any effect.
Okay. Thank
Good.
you.
All right, with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. So Mr. Hetjank, we'll add that to the list. And we're up to 1,714,000. Moving on to item D, which is Institute Parent Pay Transportation. Board members, Mr. Herron.
I asked that the X be taken off just on the theory that for those parents who can afford transportation, which was some 35%, their share would be $274. And I think that would raise about $50,000. And I guess I feel those parents who could, I don't know that we have any obligation to provide free transportation to school. And so if we create a system where those who can pay do pay something, and their share would be $274, that might not be a bad number to use if we're trying to raise funds, and again, with the theory that we don't owe transportation to people.
Right. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I was looking at that too, and I guess it depends on how you calculate share, because when I looked at the current maximum allowable rates that are, it says a daily round trip cost would be $8.06. And if you multiplied that by, I was multiplying by just 100 days, but assuming that it's not every single school day, it still brings their share, if going by that amount, up over $800. So it's kind of how we're calculating it really, I think becomes questionable. I was wondering if it might just be more appropriate to just, because I think $800, $1,000, because they're depending on how much you charge, how many days you multiply by, is unreasonable to ask any parents to pay. I was wondering if maybe it would just be more appropriate to think about what we think would be a reasonable amount for a family to be asked to pay for transportation, and then just calculate based on what we, imagining that 187 students, what that would bring us. I was thinking $100 a year, $150 a year, maybe even $200 a year, depending on what we think, but it seems to me that it needs to be a reasonable amount that a family could be expected to pay for transportation.
And I personally have no problem with that, except for that I think the 187 number is wildly optimistic, in that it is not 65% that are low income that are riding our buses, but it's probably closer to 90% or more. And so I would think that that would actually need some sort of study done, and it may be something that we want to bring back, but not part of the fiscal solvency plan. So something to consider. But is there, obviously you're all welcome to make a motion on it. Is there, Dr. Noel?
Well, could we put in a rate, which would be a basis for the study and the planning, and to accept whatever the result is? I mean, if you're saying it's an empirical question, how many people are gonna do it, well, we can say yes, but this is the maximum that we feel would be appropriate to charge them, however many people. And the multiplication is up to them, and that,
Mrs. Deacon, I'll speak first, then I'll pull it onto you. The problem for me is that until we've done that study, we can't identify a number to put in here, whatever amount that we choose, because we won't have a multiplier. And so whatever it is, it's going to be very small. It also, I don't think, would have a great effect on the solvency plan. I think it would be a very small number. So, Mrs. Deacon?
No, I just wanted to say, from the outset, I always felt that this was probably not a realistic option because, I mean, looking at the original cost estimates or charges just seemed wildly optimistic that anyone would pay that amount. And I guess if you think about the economies of scale, I don't know if enough people would pull out of using the buses, that would affect the students who ride without having to pay. And so I'm just concerned that, you know, we might spend a lot of time on this and not get a lot out of it. So,
Mrs. Cordero?
I would like to move that we withdraw D from consideration, instruct staff to look into the ridership and bring it back to us at a future date.
Is there a second for that?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on it? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, that one passes unanimously, so D does not get added to the list. Moving down, I believe the next one up is item G, Property Rentals Civic Center Act. And this was the 15% increase for usage fees through the Civic Center permits. Any board discussion, a motion? Dr. Noel?
well, this really is, that issue on the Santa Barbara Junior High Auditorium is really a subset of this. And my suggestion would be that we simply take the principle of parity and apply it to all the auditoriums, and that the district realize the same cost recovery or revenue in every case. Otherwise, as I read the Civic Center Act, otherwise we're, first of all, violating it because we're not making the auditorium available to all members of the community at a cost basis, which is required by the Act. And secondly, it would produce some revenue. I don't think it would impact. Someone sent me the IRS statement from that foundation, or from the CPAC.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't look like that would impact them a lot, but it might produce $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year for the district, and we're counting in numbers that small.
Any other discussion around this item? Item G?
I think the question
Mr.
is,
Heron?
do we do the 10, like we had last time, 10% for some and 20% for others, or just do a flat 15%? We had one testimony, that's a lot of money for that one particular thing, water polo. But Mrs. Deacon's the one that recommended the 15%. So.
That was opposed to 20%.
I am.
Mrs. Deacon?
Although, it's going to hurt everybody who uses our facilities. But in the big picture, I think this is a place maybe where we can recover some money. And actually, by going to 15% across the board, we gained something like $13,000. So it also showed me that there's a high percentage of use at the other facilities if indeed, upping them and lowering the other brought us more money. So as much as it's painful, I certainly can live with the 15%.
All right, we're sort of having a separate discussion than what Dr. Noel is proposing, though, because what I think you're proposing, Dr. Noel, is that we somehow change the agreement that we have with SIPAC.
Yeah, just charge them the same thing
All
that we
right.
charge anybody else to use an auditorium.
All right, well, why don't you make a separate motion on that
All right, when?
right now?
Right now. All right, I move that we, and I don't know the timing of this, but that the first opportunity, we renegotiate that agreement such that the district receives the same, treats all of the auditoriums with parity.
All right, is there a second? Okay, that motion dies for lack of a second. How about a motion around the Property Rental Civic Center Act, 15% increase as detailed in our agenda information?
I have a question.
Yes.
Our documents say that the savings would be almost $50,000.
Yes.
But I'm hearing smaller amounts. Is 50,000, is the 49.7?
What, actually, if I can just clarify, what I was referring to is the difference between 15% across the board or 10% and 20%.
Oh, okay.
And that,
Okay.
we actually gained about $12,000 or $13,000 by going 15% across the board.
Mr. Herron?
I have a question. Do we have a hardship ability to waive the fees? I noticed at the last meeting, we did waive fees for Harding Schools. Farmers Market. I mean, so if one of these clubs says, hey, that's more money than what we even take in, do we have a hardship?
The board can always exercise their authority to waive the fee.
We can. However, every organization, almost every organization in town is a youth-serving organization in some way, and every organization could argue that, well, they're really serving our students. What we're trying to do through Civic Center use is simply to cover the costs of other organizations using that facility. We have an expert in the room in Dave Hetyoung, if you'd like to know more about it.
Dr. Noel?
Is risk included as a cost?
Well,
There
risk
was
is,
just a jury verdict yesterday about the use of swimming pools that makes me tremble as a member of this board.
yes.
Yeah, currently for Civic Center Act, Dr. Sarvis, board members, all Civic Center Acts permits require $1 million liability insurance. In addition, we require $2 million for every user of the pool.
The jury verdict was 13.8 million.
Correct.
All right, is there a motion around item G, Property Rental Civic Center Act? Board members,
I move that we use the $49,719 number.
that we implement that. All right, is there a second?
Second.
Motion is to adopt this?
To implement item G, Property Rentals Civic Center Act fee increase by 15%. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
It passes unanimously.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
On the motion that failed to get a second, I think everyone should understand that that lease comes up in 2011. And that's the time, I think, to renegotiate it. And everybody should be aware that it's coming up and come to the table ready to negotiate.
Okay. Next on the list, I believe, was item I, have public pay for sports event parking. Board members, discussion, motion? I do have a question on this one, Mr. Smith. Have you come any closer to identifying an amount that you would charge for sports event parking?
You know, this is one that I wish I had more definitive data on. We just kind of came up with a number, so we would have to work backwards on this one.
I think we were considering $5.
Like $5 for parking?
And that's kind of what we estimated, but obviously we need to do, I think $25,000 is probably attainable, but who knows until you do it.
Is that a net number or?
Hold on, Mr.
Oh,
Hearn.
okay.
Mrs. Cordero?
Would that be applied to just varsity athletic events, or would it be all athletic events?
I think it would be any event we could charge for parking.
Well,
I'm concerned about some of the events, some of the sporting events that don't have a very big draw.
Revenue base.
And
right.
if we would actually hurt their attendance by charging for parking.
That's a good point.
we were discussing at the time the major events, like football, basketball, those kinds of events.
But varsity?
Varsity.
I don't quite remember.
I think that's what the write-up says.
Which number?
This is item I.
Large.
Large. So you could certainly specify in a motion that it was for varsity games.
Well, in some sports, they play JV and varsity and,
And stay the whole
consecutively.
term, yeah. So maybe it should just be listed as major events if a board member would care to make a motion around it. All right, you can make a motion one way or the other. You can take it off the table also. So let's get some either discussion or action on item I.
Well, because we've got so much further to go, I am going to move that, that we approve item I, sorry, thinking measures H and I, approve this item, and work with the sites to determine which events it would be appropriate to charge for.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Herron has seconded it. Okay, further discussion. Dr. Noel?
Well, I had just an idea. Maybe we should have a different rate for cars full of people than for cars with one person.
So you could certainly have a
Yeah,
differentiate.
Gotta
differentiate the rates,
gotta
yeah.
save the planet.
Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
Mrs.
and I'll
Deegan.
just add to that, when we get to student parking, there may be a way to combine some of the costs there as well.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Passes unanimously. Moving down the list, I think that we are all the way down to item R. J? Oh, sorry, I was trying to skip over J when I had my little arrow there. Charge 50% of associated student body bookkeepers ASB to ASB funds. And there's a rate listed for 100%, which is $194,993, or 50%, which is $97,496. And that is a percentage, I assume, of their income. Board members. Mr. Herron.
I had one question. I saw in one email, I think from the principal at San Marcos, that he thought this fee, or maybe his bookkeeper thought this fee was not legal. And then we had a speaker saying that it's not legal. So can we have an answer to that question?
Well, I don't profess to be an attorney, but it's done in other districts. I mean, obviously, it's a somewhat controversial thing when you do this. Clearly, the bookkeepers, or a portion of their time, exist as a result of having ASB. So there's the nexus. The speaker is correct in the sense that we do have to account for their money separately to provide good internal controls, and she was right on target with respect to that. But and we do have to provide, but there's nothing in the ed code that prohibits us from charging. And I think that's the distinction.
Board members. Motion, discussion?
I was
Mr.
compelled
Herron?
by the argument that it's $30,000 a high school that they're raising to do their things, and $30,000 comes off the top. It seems like a big number.
Well, it's a percentage.
Yeah,
so I
what we
assume-
did is
what percentage is it?
Well, actually, we looked at the cost of the bookkeepers at each site, and then basically, once you had 100%, now it'd be 50% of each
Okay.
one.
Oh, okay, I see.
So-
Gotcha. All right, board members? You can make a motion either way. Mrs. Cordero?
I'm wondering if there's any way to reduce the percentage.
Sure. You
Um,
could
so that-
reduce it in half, and then it'd be 25%.
Well, I was thinking more like 30 or so, but this is always, I mean, this is where we are right now. This is the problem. We don't want to charge ASB for costs, but if we don't do that, then we're going to be raising class sizes and eliminating counselors, and we're pitting things against each other. So I would prefer to do this one and maybe just decrease the percentage a little. So I'll move that we adopt this at, what, I don't know, 30%.
25% might be easier in terms of
Okay,
just.
25%.
All right. Is there a second on that?
I'm going to second that for the reason that when we get to these harder choices, I want to have more flexibility. And I'm sorry, I don't mean to say that's not a hard choice, but when we're looking at laying off counselors and staff, this doesn't lay off staff, and the other choices will. So I'm going to second that.
Okay. So any further discussion on this item? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. Now we need to see that number, so half of your 97,496.
Is it 48,748?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, we're just inching our way up here. All right, so I believe that we can now jump down to item R. Is that correct? Charge students for parking at comprehensive high schools. Board members. Mrs. Deacon.
I understand why this is hard to take, and I certainly listened to the students who talked about this, although I was a little confused because I thought I heard at San Marcos they're already charging students to park. Here's my thinking on this. First of all, we're trying to do everything we can to keep the cuts out of the classroom and to save counselors and staff. So this is an area that wouldn't touch staff. It's actually a fairly green move, because if you charge people for parking, they're probably going to find alternative methods of getting to school, like taking the bus. People may carpool more. And another thought I had was, because I know we're not thrilled about charging for paying for sporting events, is that if a student had a decal on their car, say a parking permit, that when they went to a sporting event, we wouldn't charge them. We wouldn't be charging them twice to park. And so a whole family could carpool, arrive at a sporting event together. So, City College does this, UCSB does this. These are students with cars. Presumably, they've paid for their cars. They're paying for insurance. They're paying for gas. We're going to ask them to pay a little bit more for the convenience of driving to school. So that's why I'm supporting this one.
Okay, Mr. Herron?
My one concern, you mentioned the City College, and the neighbors in City College are, in an uproar over the students parking on the streets. How many neighbors have we talked to that might be concerned that all of a sudden high school students are parked on their streets around every high school?
I think that City College and UCSB both have work with the neighborhoods to restrict that as much as possible. I mean, sometimes it involves resident permits in those neighborhoods, but it does work. They bring in a lot of revenue for parking at City College.
But
Mr.
are we
Herron?
equipped to go out and talk to the neighbors and work out some kind of agreement like that, or are we going to wait until they come into the auditorium here and complain about the parking?
Any other board comments? Is there a motion around this, Mrs. Cordero? No.
I'm wondering if there's an amount that makes it attractive to the students to pay that for the facility of being able to park their car on campus, and therefore would be less inclined to impact than surrounding neighborhoods. So I would recommend $25
Instead of 35.
instead of 35, because I think it sounds like a big difference to a student to say $50 a year versus $70 a year. And especially if the ASBs at different campuses wanted to charge something on top of that to continue to use it as a fundraiser, making the base amount a little bit smaller would allow them to continue to do that.
Okay, Mr. Hetjank, have you calculated that number yet? Mr. Herron?
Are we going to charge staff and administrators for parking in the lots?
Good question.
Well, that's, I think that would need to be a separate discussion. Yeah.
What do you pay, Jane?
$49,750? Okay.
One of the few perks that a retired professor from UCSB gets is a free parking pass. Active people pay $800 a year.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion on this item? Is there a motion?
I will move to include item R in our cuts or fiscal solvency plan, with the charge or the fee reduced to $25 per semester.
Per semester. All right. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
That passes 4-1 with Mr. Herron being the no vote. Continuing down the list, it's item T, eliminate 6 teachers on special assignment positions. Board discussion around this item or a motion? Dr. Noel.
I would like to, maybe it's in the detailed text, but do you have the number, Mr. Smith? If they make a distinction between district office teachers on special assignment and the site teachers on special assignment.
Yeah, 3 here, 1 elementary and 2 secondary.
Yeah.
3 at the district office. Yeah, well, but they're out of the secondary district.
Yeah. That'd be, my inclination would be to leave these funds for the sites, which, as I read the letter from one of the teachers on special assignment, and I mean, the real costs will continue. Just a question of how they get absorbed. And if we take the money away, we pass those real costs back into to the faculty. Ultimately, somebody's got to do the job.
Mrs. Deacon?
I guess this is just a question. We're chipping away at almost all of these items and reducing the amount of savings, and I'm still waiting for us to get to counselors and increasing class sizes. So I guess my question is, if we come up short at the end,
We're going to have to go back.
We're going to come back to some of these.
Thank you for raising that point, because at this point, we're not going to hit 3 million, even if we were to go to the full amount for the other items. So there are hard choices that you have to make. But don't think that you can just do 50% of this one and 25% of that one, because you're not going to get to 3 million.
We can see how close we're going to get there.
Mm-hmm. So
The 2 letters, or the 2 positions that I was impressed with were San Marcos High School, Mr. Scott, I believe. His list of duties was very impressive. Mrs. Fisher, with all of her background, sounds like she provides a service. Abby, she's currently, is she a special?
She's not one that.
She's not one?
No.
Okay.
She's the remaining elementary TOSA at the district office.
That's what I say, she is a TOSA.
Yes, and
But-
she will remain next year.
So she's not one of these 6?
She's not one of those.
Oh, okay. Jennifer does a lot of training for ESL.
That's correct. She and Abby were both originally placed for English language development. supporting the schools, coaching and training and all.
She is one
Jennifer
of these.
is.
Jennifer would be
yes,
one of those, yes,
She is one.
Ms.
We're reducing
Griffin.
by one.
And
Wait.
is there a, I mean, if we just say, okay, we want to keep 3, we're not saying which, there's a priority of the 3, isn't there, as far as which one?
Not really.
Not
They're
really.
all very different as
No,
far,
but
I mean,
as far as
Jennifer and
longevity,
Abby the same.
Tenure, that kind of thing? I mean, is there a pecking order of who gets knocked off first?
We actually hadn't looked at it like that.
Well, if we,
Because they're very different in the way,
So the
even
answer is-
within the 3 schools. No, there's no order.
Mrs. Deacon?
I would just like to say, I'm a little uncomfortable trying to evaluate these people on their individual merits, because I think they're in these jobs because what they do is really important, and they do it really well. If we were to eliminate all of these, they won't lose their jobs. They will stay at our schools, and they might end up back in a classroom, but we will still have the benefit of their expertise. So that's largely in my mind.
Mr. Herron?
is that true?
Yes,
All
in
6?
various ways. I believe that's true.
So the savings comes from not having to pay substitutes for them now?
No, you have additional, they would go
For
into.
temporary people?
Yeah, you've over noticed, so they would go into empty slots, and you would leave these 6 positions vacant.
All right, is there a motion around item T? Mrs. Deacon? I know these are hard.
Feeling
but
like the
some-
hatchet person.
I know.
here, sorry. Well, I'm going to move to eliminate the TOSAs.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion?
Just want to make sure that the 6 do have a place in the school system to work.
We're looking at Dr. Robertson down there, and she's nodding.
She's
Yes.
nodding, yes.
All right, all those in favor?
It-
Oh, any further discussion?
I just want to say, and I want it very clearly noted, which I think maybe it has been already, that we value what they have been doing, and we know they've been doing a great job, and they've been very valuable. But these are just tough decisions we have to make.
All right, with that, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
It passes 4-1 with Dr. Noel being the no vote. We need to go back to item S because I skipped that one, which is the reduce assistant principal assignments at junior high schools. This is not a reduction in personnel. This is changing. This is changing their funding source. I had thought that was actually on our definitely we will implement list. I don't know if there's board discussion or a quick board motion on this one, item S.
I'll move we implement item S.
Is there a second?
This is just changing the funding source?
Yes, it's taking it away from the general fund.
So the
Okay.
same number of hours of services will be delivered?
Yes. All those if there is no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It passes unanimously. Dr. Noel. All right, we're now up to 2.3 million. And the next item on the list is, we already dealt with this plan A with W, so the next item on the list is X, eliminate 9th grade class size reduction for English. And there are 2 numbers listed. Going to 35-1 saves 240,000. Going to 25-1 would save 119,000. Is there a motion on this item?
I'll make a motion to increase the English 9th grade class sizes 25-1. I would be very, very uncomfortable going to 35-1 in English. And I also just wanted to make the point that at San Marcos, that benefit of the lower class sizes is going to stay there with both English and math as well as at the other schools. So, as we look at increasing class sizes possibly there, this is an area in the 9th grade where at all 3 schools it's going to be low and the same.
All
if it
right,
passes.
is there a second for Mrs. Deacon's motion to increase class size to just 25 to 1 as opposed to 35 to 1. Mr. Herron?
I couldn't stay for the meeting last week, but in the policies, there was something in there about if we change the class sizes, there's supposed to be some type of study done. Did we talk about that? Did you talk about that last week by chance, or?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
It said if you go to 1 to 20, and then additional funds are available, you can then go to another subject. But if you want to change the 1 to 20, you need to have, a superintendent needs to give us a report on the ramifications of it. And
Well, remember, this is a tier 3 categorical, so all the
Okay.
program requirements are suspended.
Suspended? Okay. So that suspends our board policies?
It-
Okay.
It does, and that was the
If they're based in
superintendent's report
code.
on it.
Okay.
All right, so there's a motion. Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Mr. Herron has seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please vote aye.
Aye.
Aye. And noes?
No.
That one passes 4-1 with Mrs. Cordero being the no vote. That's the 119 number. So now we are to item Y, eliminate secondary Assembly Bill 1802 counselors. And as you can see, there's a whole gradation. It essentially starts, I believe, with the 430 to 1 as the highest number that we can go to for the savings of 270,101, all the way down to a 378 to 1, which would yield a savings of 20,202, or of course, no action on it. So the total, Mr. Hetyank, if you want to scroll down to the bottom, I think it's at, yeah, almost 2.5. So the little ones aren't going to get us very far, so we need to deal with the big ones. So item Y, is there a board motion on this one?
Can we have a little discussion first?
Or discuss first? What's your, Mr. Herron?
Just to make sure we understand the total parameters. There are 13 people involved in this decision. There are 10 temporaries, of which we're keeping 3, and that's where the 7 comes from. There's also 3 that we riffed at our meeting several weeks ago, and those 3 are hanging out there. So this is a decision that affects 10 people, and Mr. Smith did mention that those 3 riffs are another 230,000 or 240,000 possible savings, depends upon what happens down the road. There's also $300,000 or so of carryover money that's being swept into the unrestricted. So there's a lot of factors here. And one question I have, if we went to the saving 6, which means we will be letting go 7, that's 3 more than what's on here. And this is a question for you, Mr. Smith. Could those 3 extra be paid for with 1802 funds, but in the process save the 3 positions that were riffed? In other words, if we save the 3 riffs, and that's $230,000, could we use this 378 to 1 and keep, in total, keeping 6 people, but could we pay those 3 riffs with 1802 money?
Well, let's start with this premise. 1802 money doesn't exist anymore. It will all be unrestricted. So since it's a tier 3 categorical, obviously the board can make a decision to fund counselors however they want. I think what you just asked me, though, is the 3 that were riffed, can we use, if you go to a different ratio, could you use the savings to pay for them?
Yes.
And then
I mean,
what's the net, I guess my question, if you basically reinstate those 3, obviously there's an expense associated with it, so your savings has to be greater than that expense, and what's the net savings?
Well, if we went to the line 35, retaining 6, there's already 3 being retained because they weren't let go. So there's 3 that are already saved. And so that 6 is 3 more. Can those 3 more be the 3 RIF positions? Rather than 3 temporary positions?
Well, you're going to have to, I don't know, I don't know who these positions are. That's the problem I'm having. That's why I'm hedging.
Everything on there are the 10.
Yeah, if we're just talking with numbers in theory, but I can't tell you precisely that it's going to be those people because I don't know.
I'm not talking about people. I'm talking
Yeah.
about there's
Positions.
There's 10 positions under 1802. We're going to keep 3, and that's the line 32. I mean, if we go with line 32, we're saving $270,000.
Right.
If we say we want to save 3 more, does it have to be 3 of the 10, or can we take the 3 riffs and save the 3 riffs?
And we may want to have Dr. Robertson address this because this is not
right
really about, it's more about protocol than it is money. So, Dr. Robertson?
Okay, I'm trying to follow you, Mr. Herron,
Okay.
so when we approached this, we came at it a little bit differently than how you're presenting it.
Well, I know that.
So, yes, 3 that were not noticed are back in the mix. We have 3 who were riffed, that if you went to the 378 to 1, you potentially could bring back almost 3 full of rift counselors, potentially. It's pretty close in terms of the amount of money.
So one motion would be to keep 6 from the temporary pool, or a motion could be keep 3 from the temporary and 3 that are rift.
Do we
Total
need
of
to
6.
The temporaries cannot factor into this particular decision.
Well,
So
at
what,
this point.
So what you're saying, Dr. Robertson, is it's not, we would make the decision about the amount, but it would be the permanent counselors that were rift that would have priority to come
They
back,
would have
period.
priority to come back.
So that's not something that we would make a motion around.
Well, I'm going to pursue this one because it's been on my mind for 2 weeks. If we go with line 32, those 3 full-time that we're saving are temporary instructors, right, temporary counselors.
The ones that we're saving are tenured
No,
positions,
but they're-
permanent positions.
But they're on they're treated as temporary because they're on the temporary list that got notices.
No, they were
No.
on the
I-
certificated list.
They're on this,
the permanents.
These are permanent employees and/or probationary. They are not temporary.
But they're on the temporary, the 10 are on the temporary list. They were, when we voted for releasing temporary staff,
You release 7.
7, right. And then there were 3 tenured that are
3
being
tenured-
saved,
3 tenured that were rift.
ripped. Well,
And then you have 3 of those, who were permanent teachers, but who were in a temp assignment
what
in terms of counseling, but now are back as permanent
right.
counselors.
So they were on the there's 3 that are senior, but they were in
Yes.
temporary positions, but we're saving them.
Correct.
And then the choice is, if I want to go to saving 6 positions, can I specifically say that I want the extra 3 to be the 3 RIF positions and not 3 off the temporary list?
I think what Dr. Robertson is getting at is
Yeah.
that is what would happen, period.
It would have to happen.
That's what
The
would
rifts have
that's what has to
priority.
happen.
Well, but RIFs have priority. They would move into 3 temporary spots and eliminate 3 temporaries. I'm saying, can we save the 3 RIF positions and not get rid of the 3 RIF positions?
The rift positions?
Under
or
this
the-
scenario, you could save almost the full 3 rift positions and nothing else. You still have the existing counselors. You have these 3 rifts. You could save them potentially at the 378 to 1, but you would not be able to bring back any of the temporary counselors who were released unless you go into asking for more money.
I guess I just don't see that. I'm sorry.
I think for me, you're mixing terms, Mr. Herring.
Okay, well, we got, line 32 says we're retaining 3 full-time employees. And those 3 full-time employees are on the temporary list, but they're tenured teachers. And we're saving them. Then there's 7 others that are temporary. And then there's 3 over here who were rift.
Correct.
If we say we want to go to 6, who are the other 3 that will be incorporated in line 35? What positions will those other 3 be? And will you automatically just take them from the temporary and move the bodies from the RIF over to there, but the RIF positions go?
It's strictly based on seniority.
I understand
That's
that.
his, I'm trying to follow what he's saying because we did not figure it that way. There has since been other discussions with Mr. Smith and Ann Peak, so this has been now reconfigured in a different sort of way. The 3 permanent counselors who were temp as far as being on their 1802 monies have seniority rights and went back into the original amount. Those 3 are already in there.
Right. Those are,
Then you had 10 other people who were released, 7 temps, 3 were riffed. Those 3 riffed people are the ones that you're only dealing with right now with this amount of money that's there.
And-
The other 3 are already in the mix and already in the figures,
okay.
in the
but-
dollar figures.
Okay, that's exactly my understanding with my question is, the 3 rift people, are we saving the RIF slots, which are full-time slots, or are you strictly going to move the 3 people who were rift into these temporary 1802 slots? Are we going to, is in this process, are we eliminating 3 full-time slots that are tenured slots in the system? And that's
Well-
my question is, can we save the 3 positions? I'm not worried about the people, just the positions.
Potentially, yes, with this, at the 378 to 1, you could save the 3 positions. And I don't have all the figures in front of me, but almost
Yeah.
full 3.
And I'll cut off discussion at that point. And I want to keep in mind that Mr. Smith has pointed out that essentially AB 1802 doesn't exist anymore. So we're talking about counselor ratios rather than
Right.
are they categorized under 1802 or not 1802. So with that, is there a motion on item Y?
I'll make a motion.
Mr. Herron.
I would move that we go with the 378 to 1, saving, as in the plan, 3 tenured teachers on the temporary 1802 roll, and protecting the 3 RIF slots, and making the 6 full-time employees, and saving $20,000.
And that's saving $20,202. Is there a second on that?
Second.
Dr. Noel has seconded it. Okay, further discussion. Mr. Herron's proposal would save essentially $20,000. Mr. Hetyon, can we just look at the total? It's $2,465,000. We have $500,000 still to cut, and we're towards the bottom of the page. So, any further discussion on this? Then we will take a vote. All those in favor? Oh,
Aye.
wait. All those in favor? That was.
Aye.
And Dr. Noel?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
No.
That motion fails, 3-2, with the 2 in favor being Noel and Herron. Is there another motion on item Y? We need to come up with a number on this one.
I'll
Mr.
move
Hearn.
line 34, saving 3
Can't read line 34.
plus 2 of the RIF positions,
What is line 3?
Okay,
saving $99,632.
Second.
all right, any discussion on this one? Mrs. Cordero?
Sorry, my problem is that
I know, you're sitting there
I'm-
looking at what's going down. in the-
exactly. I would almost prefer to come back to this one after we've gone down the rest of the list to see how much we've been able to cut before we have to make this decision.
All right, would board members who made the motion and the second, would you be willing to table this
Well, you know,
temporarily?
Would it not be equally feasible simply to ask for reconsideration on something when we're farther down the line? Wouldn't that just be just as easy? Less ambiguous?
Not to me.
Either way, what's your pleasure, board members?
I mean, my issue is that I feel I'm having a difficult time making a decision on this one until I see where we are.
Right, I want you all to keep in mind also that we're on Plan A. So we're gonna have to come back and cut another $433,000 in priority order when we're through with this section, although I think we may take action on some other things first. But I want to make sure you all keep that in mind. So with that, Dr. Noel?
I wanted to express support for Mrs. Cordero's for the thrust of her idea, because we're going through this sequentially, and
Absolutely.
obviously you feel differently when you get farther down the
Absolutely.
list. You want to go back and look.
Right.
But maybe a lot of things you want to go back and look at.
Right.
And I just suggested a vehicle for doing that is
Right.
to simply
Well, we
make
can take a quick vote on this item now and then come back to it, one way or the other. We do have a motion on the floor. So all those in favor of changing the ratio to 394 to 1 for a savings of 99,632, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. That one passes 4-1, with Parker being the one no. Moving down the list, we are up to double E, and that is require students to make up absences for truancy and or discipline with Saturday school. And Mr. Herron, you pulled that one.
I just think it's such a paltry amount, and with the number of truants we have, and maybe, I don't know, why are we not getting more money from that source? So truants just don't go back to school on Saturday? Is that, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'm just curious.
Well, this is actually a holdover from last year, and basically Santa Barbara High School is the only Saturday school that runs it in a configuration that generates apportionment, and we just took that number times 3, and we netted that out versus the expense they have for running the program. It's just not that much money.
Yeah, I mean, there's 6,713 truants so far this year, and 100 of them or so went to Saturday school. I mean, I guess I'm just asking the educators.
You have to have, it's got to be at least a 4-hour program, and it's got to be supervised by a certificated staff member, and that's not what we have at the 2 other comprehensive high schools.
Yeah, I'm fine with the.
All right, Mrs. Deacon.
I just have a question. Obviously, it's a paltry amount in the face of where we are, but Mrs. Zawoski, maybe you could tell us, as a policy decision, will there be benefits that accrue by having these students make up these truancies? I mean, can we get them back on track more? I mean,
Well,
there
that
positive
is the
benefits to
point. I mean, we've had a talk about that with the principals, and providing the kind that could generate the ADA. I mean, everyone has Saturday schools. It's just a matter of having it for 4 hours and accounting it the way that ADA could be accounted for. So I think, it may not be exactly this number. We're not quite sure, but we didn't want to overestimate, knowing all we had was the figures that Santa Barbara High used last year.
Mm-hmm. Thank
All
you.
right, can there be a motion on this item?
I'll move to approve that item.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, so add in your 6,300. Now we are to item double F, which is increased K-3 class size up to 25 to 1 average. As you can see, there's a graded range from 20.45 to 1 all the way up to 25 to 1. Is there a motion around this item? Mr. Herron?
I move we go to 21.45 with a savings of 392,949.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That passes, any opposed? That passes unanimously. Sometimes it's hard for me to see Mrs. Deacon right now, in particular you, so I need to speak up. So that is a savings of 392,949. So we can see at this point, we are to item double G, require all certificated administrators to substitute 3 days a year.
I thought that was automatic. I would move that.
Well, for me, actually, in discussions with principals, what I realized is for elementary, when elementary principals, they're sole administrators on campus, and so when they are not in their offices, you need to provide a teacher in charge, and when you do that, you have to hire a substitute. So essentially, for secondary, you could have a situation where APs are rotating around and somebody's handling that. But it really, I don't think you could do it in the elementary district. I don't know if Mrs. Sawaski wants to address that.
For the very reasons you state, it would be very difficult. It would end up not saving anything.
Mm-hmm.
And who will substitute for them while they're doing that? Nobody.
You'd have to have subsidy, in the secondary district, you mean?
Well, I'm assuming that they're working
They are
pretty
working.
full-time, and at least I know that, that the people in the high schools, the sites that I visited, work extremely hard and long hours, and so if we're gonna take 3 days a year out, there's 3 days of services not delivered by some very hard-working people.
Either that or it'd be after hours on weekends.
For $13,000.
Well, actually, for less than that, it would be for about $9,500.
Then I'd like to move that we delete this.
Second.
All right, there's a motion that we delete item GG. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, that one passes unanimously. So we are up to 296448. First, I will ask Mr. Smith, is this close enough to 3 million, or do we need to go back at one of our items? Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting one. II. We can we can talk about II right now and see if we can save another 38,000. That might put us over the edge. All right, II. Any discussion or motion on II?
Well, I wonder if it's possible to just have a simple rule of thumb, or just a rule. We don't take money out of the general fund to support the cafeteria. And part of this is, part of my feelings being so strong are rooted in history. I mean, I've sat on this board a long time, and I've seen us go over $2 million in subsidies for the cafeteria fund. And I just think we need to draw a line. And even if it's a small line, I don't fully understand that redefinition of those funds. If for all of these years, we really shouldn't have been putting that money into the general fund, why have we been doing that?
I'm not saying that. I'm saying you have the latitude. You have the latitude to retain it in the unrestricted general fund, or you have the latitude to give it as a revenue transfer to the cafeteria fund. And the underlying premise there would be is that the Meals for Needy add-on to the revenue limit, the basis for that was it was a permissive override tax that was basically levied by school boards prior to the passage of Prop 13 to provide needy families meals.
Prop
And
13, when was that?
It's probably 78 was Prop 13. So basically what happened is when the revenue limit was created, there was a variety of add-ons included to it. One being, continuation high schools used to get an add-on to the revenue limit, Meals for Needy, other various and sundry things that were tacked on based on unique characteristics of various districts. Not every school district in the state of California has a Meals for Needy add-on. It had to be in place at the time that the revenue limit was created. So there could be a philosophical argument that those dollars should go to the cafeteria fund. However, you also have, probably if you asked me this question 10 years ago, I'd probably say, hey, let's not give those dollars to the cafeteria fund, keep them in the unrestricted general fund because, there's always a premium on unrestricted dollars. So it's really a policy question.
Well, I'd like to ask a little differently, rather than being philosophical. If we stop subsidizing the cafeteria fund with that money, will needy children go hungry?
Well, we currently are subsidizing.
You are subsidizing. You're subsidizing at $380,000. The way you're doing it right now is through an interfund transfer, which is on the expense side of the ledger. In this particular case, you would be taking the income and doing a revenue transfer. So it's the same amount of dollars. I want to be clear about that. That would be leaving the general fund and going to the cafeteria fund. However, the thing about the Meals for Needy add-on to the revenue limit, it grows both by increase in participation rate and also if there's a cost of living adjustment, like in good years, not like these years, if the state provides a COLA, it grows by that amount too. So if you had sustained increase in participation and COLAs, right now we're getting 330,000. That number could grow to 500,000-600,000. Basically, really it would be no you couldn't attribute that growth to the general fund. You'd have to attribute it to the cafeteria fund because they basically increased the participation.
Which is where
So-
I think it makes sense for it to go, and if there are cost of living allowances, then the cost for the food's going to be going up also, so that makes sense. Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I think the philosophical discussion is actually significant because although they're not restricted funds, they certainly were provided with an intent.
That's the historical basis.
And the intent is to provide meals for needy students, and we don't do that really elsewhere in the general fund. It really goes through the cafeteria fund.
And if we change the accounting treatment, I just want to be clear about this. You would, unless they reduce expense or increase revenue elsewhere, you're going to approximately give them the same amount of revenue. You're not going to see it as an encroachment per se. You won't see it as an interfund transfer, and you won't see it as a contribution. So the accounting treatment is different.
You've presented this to us before. You've
I've
told us about
you
this before.
Yeah, I've been in districts that have,
And
it's always a philosophical question among boards. I mean, obviously, this was a huge issue when I was in Berkeley.
Right.
It's been also a huge issue when I was in Paso Robles. Totally different sides of the continuum on this issue, as you could probably imagine. So I don't have, I'm just saying, here's one possible way to account for it. The board has to make a decision from a policy perspective how they want to deal with this.
So I'd like to move that we approve as part of the fiscal solvency plan, II.
Is there a second?
Second.
And
Like to move
Mr., yeah,
an
Dr. Noel,
amendment?
yeah.
I have no, my amendment simply says in effect, let's stop taking it into the general fund and put it where it belongs. I have no problem with that.
Well, it's slightly different what you're proposing, because I think you're saying if in future years, because right now that would certainly be true, but what I'm hearing you suggest is that in future years, we would never touch we would never have a general fund contribution if there were some problem in the cafeteria fund.
I didn't say that.
Are you just restating II then?
Right. On the specific issue of the meals for the needy, I'm saying it would be a lot cleaner and understandable to simply have that money through whatever accounting mechanism go directly to the cafeteria fund.
All right. Well,
Then
is
that leaves a residual issue that if they still don't break even, then I don't want to subsidize
And
them.
you do have that residual issue, so that's a nice segue to my next question. Would the board's pleasure be to try and reduce expense there, or increase revenue, or?
I think that needs to be a separate talk.
Okay.
And right now, Dr. Noel, what you're proposing is included in II. And so we have a motion and a second, and all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
None opposed, it passes unanimously. Let's see where that gets us.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
can I just, Dr. Noel was talking about not having an encroachment. This says the encroachment would be represented by
No,
38.
what Dr. Noel was talking about was making sure the Meals for Needy money went to the cafeteria.
Okay,
fund.
as long as we're clear.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have no quarrel with that.
All right, so with our Plan A, we're at 3 million. We've been talking about this a long time. When we come back to it and do Plan B, which is if we don't reach an agreement with San Marcos, what are the priority lists? I want you to be thinking about that. We do have other items on the agenda that I would like to get to. We'll go past 10:30, just probably dealing with this item E1, but I would like to take a break from E1 with the board's permission and move quickly to E2 and E3 so that those members of the public that are here dealing with that can speak to us before it gets very much later. And we will take a very, very brief break. Right now. Smith is here. Where is
Ms. Zawoski, Mr. Smith, Dr. Noel,
Can we,
Mr. Heron,
let's go ahead and finish.
we need you up here.
Come on back.
What's the total?
All right, so we are taking a break from item E1. We will be returning to that. Right now, we are on item E2, the approval of Santa Barbara School District's municipal lease financing for the Washington Elementary School Portable Classroom Project.
And Mr. Smith, our Deputy Superintendent, will make this presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvis. As part of the Mitchum lawsuit settlement, the district was required to make portable classrooms at the south end of the Washington Elementary School campus accessible and to provide accessible restroom facilities. This project was really to be done in 2 phases. Phase 1 was to move the 7 portable classrooms to the asphalt playground during the summer of 2008 and have these classrooms accessible by the end of calendar year 2008. The second phase was to be completed using, the second phase was to do the surface infrastructure and pads for placement of the portables, and it was really supposed to be completed using the proceeds from a cash-out refunding of Measure I-98 general obligation bonds. Due to the loss of that funding, now we're in a circumstance where we have the project halfway completed. We need to get it completed. We're trying to find and identify a way to get it completed. We've met with the Washington school community, solicited their input, met with the site administrator, and then went to task trying to find an alternative way of financing this. We've worked with Municipal Finance Corporation, who's a firm that specializes in municipal leases. We're looking at a lease purchase option where we would essentially borrow the money over 10 years at 4.5% interest rate. It's $850,000 was actually the value of the project based on a competitive bid a couple months ago. We think that number will still hold. If we borrow at 4.5% and amortize it over 10 years, we pay a little bit over $1 million at about $100,000 a year payment. Obviously, this really sticks in my craw because I'm not big on non-voter approved debt. So if we proceed with this, which I think we must, then I would say that if we do get federal stimulus dollars, the first call on those dollars should be to retire the debt. That would be my recommendation. Obviously, if the board approves this, we could have it funded within 45 days. That would set things in motion to basically have some of the work done this summer. Working with Washington staff, we'd probably be able to hit some other windows and then complete it by next summer. But I think that the most important thing is be symbolic that we're actually doing something and getting this project done. Dave Hetyonk's here too to basically answer any of the operational questions you might have about the project. But at our, at this point in time, we'd recommend that you proceed with the financing.
I do have a quick question for Mr. Hetyank, and that is, we did have bids on this before. Would it have to go out to rebid? Can we use the bid winner from the previous round? What would
Legal counsel has advised us that that we should meet with the contractor and ask the contractor if he's still willing to do the job for the same price. And if the contractor is, the board could rescind the previous rejection of all bids and award to the low contractor. What has happened is your bonds, we sent the contractors notices that their bonds were released, that we rejected all bids. So the contractor would have to agree that he would still hold on the price and that he would have to reinstate his bonds. If the contractor doesn't agree to hold on his price, then we're forced to do something else.
Okay.
May I weigh in on this as
yes,
well?
Dr. Sarvis.
You know, this is a project where we had all the ducks lined up and everything was going to go. We had the timelines all built, and with the Attorney General's opinion, it really pulled the plug on this, and it was something that was really out of the blue for us. If we don't do anything, we probably won't get this done. That campus will sit looking like that for a couple of years. We would not have enough developer fees to be able to get that done.
Okay, Mr. Herron?
Yeah, just one question. You mentioned generically any stimulus funds. Do you really mean any or?
Elementary district.
But for construction purposes? Like, I mean, are you talking about stimulus funds specifically for construction modernization?
Actually, the way we just did the application last week, we probably will see, at least have estimates probably by mid-May of what we'll get. And one of the permissible uses is school construction.
But like special education funds coming in?
That's separate pot of money. There's a separate pot of money. Actually, this would be for the Budget Stabilization Act, and those dollars, I mean, both sets of dollars are specifically one-time dollars. And we had this conversation previously, and I think somebody asked about it in the audience. you know, one of the issues is that if and when we get these dollars, they are one-time in nature. So even though they could be sizable, you know, we have a rule of not using one-time dollars for things that eat. So, you know, obviously this project would be a, you know, a good fit.
Dr. Noel?
Let me understand that we're on this paragraph, fiscal impact funding source. It says funding will originate from a combination of developer fees and unrestricted funds, unless the federal stimulus money comes. I'm concerned about the unrestricted funding. On this occasion particularly, as we're cutting $3 million from unrestricted funds, I am very concerned about invading those unrestricted funds for this project.
So am I, but I don't think we have any choice.
There's not enough developers' fees to make the payments?
Developer fees are really down right now. I mean, obviously, we'll look there first, but we might have a combination of developer fees and unrestricted general fund dollars to make the payment. Obviously, if we got stimulus dollars that could retire the debt early, that would be our first preference.
Do you have any idea what the mix is going to be between developer fees and how much are we going to invade the unrestricted fund to pay $107,000?
I don't know.
a
What do
year?
you think? 50-50, probably, Dave?
I would hope we'd have more developer fees for that. We're doing two things right now, Dr. Noel. We're out for a new justification study, and based on that study, we may be able to raise our developer fees. And of course, developer fees are based on building permits and increased square
and they're
footage
down.
being built, and so they're down. So it's really a guessing game. I would hope that we'd be better than 50-50.
So we're
but I
looking at
wouldn't
the
wanna make that
possibility of
promise.
$50,000 a year out of general fund on this.
Hopefully for only a year.
Mrs. Cordero?
Well, as much as I agree with you that I don't like the idea of incurring this debt or having to pay for it out of unrestricted funds, I'm a little bit reluctant to specifically earmark all stimulus monies to retire this debt, given that we are in such a precarious financial situation and we can't anticipate what's coming down the line. I would be happy to support this recommendation, but I would like to reserve the right to consider the most appropriate use for the federal stimulus monies if and when we get them.
I'm just putting it on the radar.
Right, and it's not as part of the resolution,
No,
it
it's
doesn't
not.
refer to that.
It's
So
not
if you
part of the
moved to-
recommendation or the resolution. It's just something.
Mhm.
I have a particular aversion to issuing non-voter approved debt unless we have a dedicated funding source.
Dr. Noel?
Just a footnote, and when would the first 50,000 come out of the general fund?
That'd be next year.
In the budget year we're now working on?
That's correct. So, I mean, obviously, if we could pay for it all out of developer fees, that's what we would do.
For at least the first year. All right, Mrs. Deacon.
Just one last question. So we have no way of knowing how certain the federal stimulus money might be.
Well, here's the we've applied in both districts. We think we'll have some estimates by mid-May. When you go through the automatic online application process, you would think you would get in the door and you'd see like this database of estimates, but there's nothing, just a litany of assurances you have to give the federal government.
Okay.
And the reason I ask that is because there's a 2% prepayment premium that we
Right.
could potentially avoid if we knew this money was there.
Right.
Okay, we do have two speakers on this item.
Mrs. Jacobs, followed by Mrs. Haller.
Hi, first I just wanted to thank you for considering this issue. I think that when this first came to Washington's school, that you were going to not be able to fund the project. There was quite an uproar among our parents, and those of you who came and saw our school site, you obviously saw why. There was a huge debris pit and portables on the blacktop right next to kids that are playing and making loud noises, and it really is a trying situation. So I really appreciate your coming to the school and learning about it. Even more, the board's direction to the school district to find a speedy way to fix this. I really appreciate Mr. Smith and Mr. Hetjunk coming and meeting with parents and administrators at the school. It was a very agitated group of parents, and we appreciate your patience with us. And I do encourage the board to pass this measure and get our school, give the kids back their playground, get our school back to being a quiet place where kids can study. And we would really appreciate your extending yourselves in this direction. We understand that this is a risk that you are taking. If you do have more questions about the environment that has been created at the school by this project being on hold, I'd encourage you to come and look at it, especially during recess time. So thank you very much.
I just wanted to thank Mr. Herron and Mr. Smith for coming to our school, or for you coming to our school and talking to us about it some more and to find some way to resolve this situation. I own a property that backs up to the site where the portables were placed. I sent photos, and you've seen it. My concern is that the timeline for this is going to just keep extending. It'd be nice if it could happen, sooner than later. Not only is it, something that we have to look at every day, which is a whole other budget kind of way to save money, is that all night we hear the heaters and the air conditioners running. I think that the school district needs to have some sort of policy on having the janitors or whoever's cleaning shut these things off at night, because we hear it all night long, clicking on, clicking off. That would be a good way to generate some income for the school district and somehow coming up with a plan for energy use. As well, my concern is the portable that is closest to our property line, which we've been told by the city is in the setbacks, and that the district is being fined $300 a day for these 3 portables that were put without the approval of the city. The one does not have an exit for children if there was a fire at the front of the door. The window that looks out, the only escape for these children, is fenced off with chain link. If there was a fire at the front of one of those doors, how would the children escape? I think there's other issues with this project that need to be addressed, and one is that in the future, any adjacent homes to district property, these neighbors need to be notified of what's going on, especially when it doesn't have city approval. Thank you.
All right, is there a motion to approve the Santa Barbara School District's municipal lease? Would like to see if there's a motion first, and then we'll have further discussion.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right, further discussion, Dr. Noel.
I wanted to ask the superintendent about this $300 a day fine.
Yeah, I'd like Dave to address that, please. Yeah, he knows a lot about it.
Someone from the city planning office sent the district a letter saying that we were in violation of the city ordinance that doubles the setback for non-residential use in a residential area. It is opinion of our legal counsel that that particular ordinance of the city does not apply to the school district. The only city justification or jurisdiction over the school district is for Coastal Act issues. We've been in discussions with the city. We've provided the city with our schedule. Our counsel and myself have been in contact with their planning department. We are currently not being fined. We have one legal opinion. The city has another. And I think we've both agreed to try and solve the problem as quickly as possible, but we are not being fined.
All right, there is a motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
I oppose it.
That carries 4-1 with Dr. Noel opposing. Now we're on to item E3, approval of Harding Elementary School restructuring plan.
And Robin Sawaski, our Associate Superintendent for Education, will make this presentation.
Okay, thank you. I think you've reviewed the material of the restructuring plan, And you did get to hear in August when when the Harding School came forward with the plan for feasibility for the IB program, the early program. One thing I want to really clarify, and it's in the very beginning of the restructuring plan as well as the memo on the board agenda, is that Harding School will most probably enter year 4 of program improvement. There is a huge sense of urgency because of this. I've been a part of a team that has been doing walkthroughs at the school all year long, and we've been looking at improvement. We've been really looking at all the ways that we can boost student achievement at that school, and we really need to move forward in a very thoughtful, strategic way. This restructuring plan was built around looking at the alternative governance that we have to go by for No Child Left Behind, reopen the school as a charter, replace all or most of the staff, including the principal, contract with an outside entity to manage the school, or any major restructuring. We've selected a major restructuring. We have here tonight too Dr. Sally Kingston, the principal, and Dean Jane Connolly from the Gewurz Graduate School of Education, because they're part of this thing, obviously. There are sections of this, I'm going to try to briefly go through it. The implementation of the IB program and the initiation of a UCSB lab school, those two components really are tied together very closely. The lab school piece, which is extremely exciting to me to be able to start something like that in Santa Barbara with one of our schools, similar to like the UCLA one, there's one in Davis, there's one in San Diego. They're all very different. We're getting to start one here, and that's so exciting. That particular piece is directly supporting the IB implementation. The content specialist, with IB, of course, there's a lot of knowledge that needs to, be gone on with the curriculum. A lot for the teachers to take on. The support of the UCSB Lab School is put in there as a support, as kind of directly linked with that. The next section that's tied to those also is creating a governance council. So that's intended to be an inclusive group, so that it has all of the partners, if you will, in the restructuring. The next part about more time to learn, that's taken, from research. We all know that many of our students, if the more we can get the time with, highly qualified teachers and instruction, the better. So the proposals here are just ideas around how that might happen, particularly the year-round schedule. That's something that takes a year at least to work with the community and the parents, and those are not necessarily givens. Those are proposals that are out there, how we can do that. There's lots of ways to extend learning the year and the day. So that's there for the work that would follow. The rest of the items there, expectations for all teachers, and I mean all teachers in this case, there's nothing really different than any other schools in our district. Those expectations are really kind of where our direction has been going for the last several years, and where we intend to really build the capacity and make sure when I say all there that it really is truly all teachers. So at Harding School with the restructuring program, we're really pushing that sense of urgency and the word all. And we have talked to the staff over time, as you can see in the memo. We've met with them 3 times now, and we would like your approval of the restructuring plan, and with that would be the approval for the IB implementation. They've gone through this first year and done the steps. They're completing the application to move forward. So questions?
All right, questions, board discussion? Mrs. Deacon.
Well, first of all, I think this is a really exciting proposal, and I'm really looking forward to implementing it. And I hope the rest of the board feels that way too. And I especially think their interface with UCSB is terrific. I think there's going to be lots of benefits for our students, but your students as well. And I think that's a great piece of it. I had one question because I wasn't on the board when the IB program was approved. How does the IB curriculum align with the California State
Good
standards?
question. The curriculum for an IB school is the California standards. An IB school uses all of the materials that we would adopt as a district. There are other things on top. There's a second language. There are ways of integrating the curriculum and making it very powerful and strong, very high expectations. But the curriculum is the same, California standards.
Any other comments or questions? Dr. Noel.
Ms. Deacon raised one of the points. This is a short document, but do you do like standards correlations between the IB curriculum and?
It's very different. Do you want to go up? I don't know. You know what? I can try to answer it, and if it's different, then you can, or if you need to add to it. It's not like the core knowledge where there are different standards, if you will, that need to be aligned with the California standards. IB standards they're not separate standards. We use the California standards. But Sally, do you want to
My imagery is one of seeing a course outline or a curriculum or a syllabus here, and then seeing it keyed to standards here. So that you can look and say, for every piece of that curriculum, here's the standards or the set of standards it addresses. That's what I meant by correlation.
Sure.
There are 6 trans global themes across the school and in preschool there are 4, where we are in time and space, how we share the planet, how we organize ourselves, and teachers actually make a matrix of inquiry around these transdisciplinary themes. They map the standards, they find key concepts, skills, and they develop units of learning that are about 50 to 60% of the time, 6 to 9 weeks in length, rigorous with alternative means of assessment at the end, around these themes, mapping all of the standards and curriculum materials. And then as part of the authorization, there's a whole set of standards that the school has to meet in order to be authorized: philosophy, curriculum, what is taught, what is learned, how do you assess, what happens in the classroom. And so one of the major benefits of the matrix, or the preschool through 6 map of the units, is that to be approved, there can be no overlaps and no gaps. So there's a lot of attention paid to how the alignment works across the school.
Okay, Dr. Noel.
So will all students be in the IB program, or will it be a subset?
No, it's a whole school reform in the elementary, and to be approved, 100% of the teachers have to be implementing the program fully. So all students in preschool through 6th grade will be participating. It isn't like the high school and middle school where there's strands and you have certification.
Yeah.
It's a whole school reform.
It's a whole school reform?
Yes.
So it'll be an IB school?
Yes.
In total?
Yes.
I didn't realize that. That's terrific.
Any other comments or questions? My own comment is about the year-round schedule. We are adopting a new board policy on when to, sort of a process for adopting year-round calendars. There are pros and cons to it, and it's something that I would really need to see a lot of parent support for. And so I would want any motion to include where it says SBTA waiver process required, and also the board policy, which I don't have the number off the top of my head, can you believe it? The board policy on year-round schedules would also be followed. Or year-round schedule adoption would also be followed. Yeah, any other comment before we take public comment? All right, we do have one public speaker on this.
Mr. Wheeler?
Thank you, Lane Wheeler, Santa Barbara Teachers Association. We have been working, the Santa Barbara Teachers Association is working with Harding School and Dr. Kingston on the implementation of this plan. I was there today and had an opportunity to speak with 23 teachers from both regular ed and special ed. While there is a great deal of excitement and interest in the program, there was also a very marked level of concern and a very strong desire to go through, to move forward in and this was a quote, a professional and methodical fashion. So as any new program is brought forward, there are oftentimes matters and issues that need to be negotiated and bargained as we go along. And I would encourage Dr. Kingston and the Harding School staff to continue to work with the Santa Barbara Teachers Association in that regard as we move through on these articles. Just to give you a couple of examples, there is no precedent right now for an elementary school incorporating a preschool into its framework, and there's questions of how that's directed. There may be questions on evaluations and which standards are we using. We still need to learn more about the IB program and certifications that are required. As has already been stipulated, there is a question about the time to learn issue and extending the school day, as well as the possible year-round program. SBTA is welcomes the challenge that this will present and looks forward to continuing to work in that regard to make this a successful transition. As I said, there's a very dedicated staff there who do want to be involved in this process, and they do want their voices heard, and they do want to see this succeed. But they also are very concerned with the speed this has come. That's not a surprise, certainly, but it certainly is moving forward in a very rapid succession. And in that same framework, those daily teaching responsibilities, testing responsibilities are still on their shoulders. And that becomes a very, very full plate. And in a consideration to those professionals that are working every day to make this successful, we would just ask that we would move forward in a spirit of cooperation and work in a very collaborative fashion to find the proper address for each of these issues as we come to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there a motion?
I would like to. I would like.
All right, Mrs. Cordero.
I would like to move to approve the Harding School Elementary School restructuring plan with the reminder that SBTA continue to work with the school to reach all necessary waivers and agreements, and that the district's policy on year-round schedule be taken into account.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that passes 5-0.
I
And Dr. Noel?
I wanted to say something before I made the motion,
Mhm.
and I just wanted to particularly acknowledge Dean Connolly's participation and express my gratitude for that, and my hope that it works well.
There's confidence. And we also appreciate your patience. I know it's very late at night at this point, so thank you. And Mrs. Cordero?
And I would very much like to just make a comment as well, to especially to Dr. Kingston, that I really appreciate the inclusiveness of this program, that it is an all-school program, because I really look forward to the likelihood that it will result in more of our underrepresented students being prepared for higher level courses once they go on to junior high. So this is very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, it is now just past 10:30, board members. We have items still on the action agenda, consent, and we need to go back to E1. I would like us to go ahead and continue on past 10:30. I would like to ask Dr. Sarvis if it's feasible to pull item E4, the nomination and approval of a board member representative to the South Coast Gang Task.
Yes, it certainly is. We can move it to our next agenda
All
and
right.
take it up next week.
We will pull item E4. So now we are on to E5, board action on student expulsion case number 0809-58. Is there a motion?
Move to
This is a
accept the findings and recommendations.
It's a stipulated agreement?
It's a stip, yeah.
Okay.
Accept the stipulated
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes 5-0. At this time, we will go back to item E1. And Mr. Hetjank has prepared the spreadsheet for us, so we know what Plan A was. At this point, he has put the number for San Marcos back in, or I should say taken it out. So now you're back down. If you want to show down at the bottom, I think we're down at 2,256,000. 9. So essentially, we need to find about $430,000 more in savings. There were not very many items that offered a range. I also want board members to keep in mind that the San Marcos parity issue is a secondary district issue. So keep that in mind in terms of being fair where cuts are made. So, Mrs. Cordero.
When, I guess, I'm trying to figure out how to say this. It seems likely, it seems almost a given, although maybe that's too optimistic, that even if we did not achieve the full amount of what we think has been agreed to for the parity issue, it seems likely that we would probably reach some amount.
Right, so this is what what I'd like to hear from you. A priority list. So for example, you'd say this item is the first one, if we can't make it to where there's $433,000
Okay.
in savings, this item is the first one that the district would go to make up, maybe it's a $60,000 difference.
Okay.
So you need to give it to me in priority. There actually, I see only 3 items. Please let me know if I'm missing something. I see only 3 items, and that is item X, eliminate the 9th grade class size reduction. Y, eliminate secondary assembly bill 1802 counselors. And double F, increase K-3 class size to 25-to-1 average. There are other ones in there where we did 25% instead of 50% or 50% instead of 100%, so you could look at those as well. But without a lot of discussion about this, because I feel like we've had our discussions about what we really wish that we could do, can we talk about it? If we cannot reach $433,000, but we achieve some lesser amount of savings, what is the first, can somebody make a motion on the first area that they would extend the savings on or extend the cuts on?
Can I make one comment first? Because
Yes,
I talked to
Mr.
Mr. Clevenger to make it very clear that this is not us putting San Marcos in a position of saying if they don't follow through with what they said, they're going to be responsible for a counselor's lost job, or they're going to be responsible for increased student ratio. And he agreed that it would not be used that way against us. So I want to make sure that this isn't a list that goes back to them and said, if you don't do what you said you do, here's what the result is, and here's how it's hurting people.
Well, I would certainly hope that that's not the way it would be addressed in negotiations.
Yeah.
The reality is that if this does not happen, this is what a consequence is.
But that's how it's perceived in the past.
Mhm.
And then we worked with you because we didn't want to lose librarians. We worked with you because we didn't want to do this. And that's not the intent of this, I don't think. I think they assured me as best they could that this proposal is something they're going to work very hard to get through. And so I
Right.
hope we're just going through this exercise as an exercise, and then
I
it
sure
won't be
hope so too.
implemented.
Dr. Noel.
Well, I'm inclined to want to look again at the class size, K-3 class size reduction. You know, the 24-to-1 particularly.
That would be the first place that you would go? Is there are you making a motion that would be the first thing that you would do is go to 24-to-1 on item FF? Is there a second for that? All right, that idea or motion will die for lack of a second. Board members, make a motion. Mrs. Cordero.
I would, I guess I would start with charging students for parking at comprehensive high schools. It wouldn't result in a large increase, but it would be another $50,000. So that would be my
So we already approved that. Did you mean the
To increase it
to
back
increase it from 25
from the
to
25
35?
to 35.
So that was about a $25,000 difference, yes?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, yes.
Okay.
So that would be
Your first area.
my first area.
All right, let's make that into a motion, please.
Okay.
All right.
I move that the first additional cut be, or additional cost savings be to restore the $35 fee in R.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstention? Mr. Herron, I'm not sure. I
I'm-
did.
yes.
Were you an aye?
Yes.
Okay, so that passed 5-0. Dr. Noel?
I just wondered why we did not have an analogous proposal for faculty parking. I mean, it just, every.
I think is that something that needs to be negotiated?
I don't know, well, I have no idea, but every university I've been at charges its faculty, and I imagine City College probably charges its faculty, does it?
No,
No.
no, it doesn't,
It
and
does
it's
not.
part of negotiation.
But do they charge?
No,
Oh, they
No.
don't?
No,
Oh.
no. And I have to say, I think our teachers make less than university faculty, so I would have a hard time charging our teachers for parking.
Okay.
Well, I have a hard time charging students, but.
Yeah, it's all difficult. So can I have a motion for another area, for the next area? We need to get to 433,000.
I would move to,
Mrs. Cordero?
that our second priority be to restore J to the 50%.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that passes 5-0. All right, we are gradually getting closer, so next motion, please. Dr. Noel?
Well, I would be totally out of character if I did not suggest that we take something like a percentage cut off of the operations of the district office. I notice it's not on the list.
Mm-hmm. Do we have
And
any?
I can't generate a number off my head, but I bet you, I don't know, what's the total cost of running a district office?
That'd be hard to define. Mhm. Well, that's a motion. Is there a second?
Well, I'm trying to come up with a percentage, but you have to
Okay.
make a motion, but.
Yeah.
But I don't know, see, I mean, to fill out your right-hand column, I don't
Yeah.
have a number to put in.
Right, yeah, that would be very difficult. Okay, Mr. Herron?
Just as a question, and if it's out of line, just say so. We're hiring new special ed people, several positions. And we're going to get special ed money coming in. Those new positions are in the budget. Can we use the special ed money coming in to pay for those new positions, thereby saving that money from the budget?
Well, once again, remember, even the IDEA and the Title I are one-time money spread over 2 years.
Okay, so that would get us through the next 2 years if we paid those positions.
Well,
I'm just,
Are you talking about the executive director and directors?
the executive director, the director, and the three
Well,
specialists.
and that is certainly what we would do with federal special education money, but it would only last for a 2-year period.
And what would happen to the money that's saved because we used the special ed money?
Well, that's money that we just recently added to the budget. We haven't built the budget for next year yet.
So that's not in
So-
your calculation, that,
there's no federal dollars contemplated.
no, but is there the staff contemplated?
No.
Okay.
Because we haven't constructed the budget, because we're going through this process.
All right, I need a motion. Dr. Noel?
I move that we reduce the staffing at the district office by something like one FTE as a senior salary level, say $150,000.
Is there a second? All right, that motion dies for lack of a second. Is there a motion for the next priority?
Did we eliminate all transportation, all parent-paid transportation?
Right, we voted to have that come back to us
Okay.
as a study. All right, folks. I know that nobody wants to do the really painful stuff, but there are not a lot of options.
Can we plug 25 or 30,000 in parent pay just to get a number in there?
If there's a motion and a second and a majority.
I move we add 25,000 for parent pay.
Is there a second?
Okay.
I have to ask, I guess, a little bit more about what that would mean.
Mhm. All right, so that motion dies for lack of a second.
Well, can I ask Mr. Herron for a clarification?
Well, I think parents can pay for transportation. Now, how much, I don't know, but a lot of these numbers are guesswork. Might as well have another one that's guesswork. I mean, you should be able to get some money from parents who can pay, who like the bus transportation. And again, the study will show whether it's good or not, but.
I'll second Mr. Herron's motion.
All right, there is a motion and a second to plug the number 25,000 in for savings from bus transportation. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No, that passes 4-1, with Parker being the no.
What's our,
So what's the total
What's
that
the
we're
total?
at, Mr. Hetjong? Sorry, that was plug in $25,000 in savings. All right, so we need to get about 335,000. All right, so that brings us down essentially to item X, item Y, and item double F.
Is it possible to go back to some of the ones that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then I would move that we, with respect to freshman athletics at each school, that we try to recover half of that,
All right, is there a second?
which would be, 30,000.
Is there a second? That motion dies for lack of a second. Board members?
I would also move the same thing about athletic trainers. I move that we reduce the athletic trainers by a third.
Although that is a negotiated item and probably not possible to do in that, it's a negotiated item with CSEA, correct? And so I don't believe that's possible.
When do we,
That would have to be something that maybe could be brought back next year after a process. I don't know if you want to chime in.
I thought you could remove all or part of an FTE without
Right,
negotiating.
so what you're saying is
I'm
that
not
you could
talking
remove it
about-
at one school?
I'm just saying, reduce the fractional reduction in FTE.
Yeah, that's the issue with CSEA and their contract. Unlike elimination of a position for lack of work or lack of funds, they have a provision in their contract, a reduction in hours has to be negotiated.
All right, is there a second on some sort of attempt around that? That motion dies for lack of a second. Mrs. Cordero?
I have a question. On our class size increase for K-3, I'm not, why do we have 21.45 versus 22?
Question. The reason is when K-3 class size reduction was implemented, and as it evolved over time, you never got penalized unless you exceeded the average of 20.44 at P2. Okay, you could be in excess of that after P2 since nobody audits after P2. So when the state gave us this continuum, we started with 20.44, and that's how they did the intervals. Those numbers, they were all based on the high end of the continuum in terms of the savings. That's the way Meg did it. It
All
seems
right.
bizarre, but that's the way it is.
Okay, I'm going to, this is not related to that, but I'm going to move that our next priority, if we need to go there, should be to, to go to 6.5 FTEs in the counseling.
I'm sorry, 6.5 FTEs.
I'm sorry, 4.65. I apologize.
Okay. That would save us an extra about 40,000, less than $40,000.
Like 33, maybe.
33. Is there a second? Okay, that motion by,
second that.
oh, there's a second there from Dr. Noel. My concern with this is that I don't think we're getting near to our 433. Nobody wants to do this, and we're very much hoping this is a plan B. But
well, let me tell you why it's a little bit difficult to make the large ones, is because, and this is my concern, and I don't know how to maneuver it. So, what if, for example, what if we say, okay, rather than doing the 4.65, that we say, okay, we'll increase class size to 24 to 1, to make a larger chunk. But then we don't need that full amount.
right.
But that becomes the next priority. It's a priority before making this smaller cut. Then how do we negotiate that? How do we deal with that? Because I don't want to put raising class size ahead of something else if we don't need that full amount that we would get from that class size.
Right. So I guess what we could do is say, we could go back to it and say, if you want to do something with counselors first, this is your next priority, and then class size at this level, and then go back to counselors at the next level, and then go back and go back and forth.
And that's why I feel like I'm certainly doing it in small increments.
Right.
Because
Right, but
I'm anticipating.
You could make a motion around item Y and item double F that that in each case that those move in lockstep together. That as if more money is needed, then it would go to the next level in item in terms of enrollment. In well, first, the very first place would be the first next step in counselor ratios. Then K-3 class size increase in size by the next level in terms of increases, and then toggle it. So is that the kind of motion you'd like to make?
Well, only see, I don't see anything else that's going to get us to where we need to be.
Increasing class size in ninth grade is going to, you could save an extra 120,000.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, could you do the same principle for the ninth grade?
And that I'm not sure about. I mean, I don't know that you could. I don't know if they've done that sort of analysis. We can see the analysis for the numbers here, but I'm not sure what kind of a difference it makes above 25. Mrs. Deacon. I know, sorry, 25 to 35, but none of the gradations between. Mrs. Deacon.
I know I can only speak for myself, but I'm sensing among other board members that we actually probably feel equally bad about cutting either, one of these, or increasing class size or cutting counselors. And so I like the idea of basically saying, they have equivalent low priority that we hope we don't have to go to. I don't know how soon we're going to hear back on San Marcos, and if it's possible to calculate kind of a 50-50 split in Y and FF in the interim, hoping that we won't have to go there at all. But I don't know if we're really making a lot of progress at this point, I guess.
Right. Well, if we did it, that we would sort of share the pain between double F and Y, so that the 132,000 sorry, no, we're at the 99,000, could go up to 270,000 in savings. So that's about 170,000. And then the K3 could go up to a savings of 539. And that's a savings of about, let's see, about 150,000. Would that bring us to our $3 million number, Mr. Hedyank? And then
What did you say, the K3 could go up to what?
it could go up to 25 to 1, which would be a savings of about, we're currently at 392,000, let's say 393,000.
So like
So it's the difference.
150?
Yeah, so it's like about 150,000.
What-
Add one to each and go to the total, and add one to each and go to the total, or?
Well, I think just
What
show
is
the
the total right now?
Add the maximum, yeah, add the difference.
Wait, that.
2,666,000, yeah, that is without the San Marcos number in there. So what you need to add in is the increase from, so change that number 99632 to the maximum of 270,101. This is just wait and see what this number pulls up for us. And then the K3 maximum, change that to 539,632. Sorry, it's 632. All right. I think that, Mr. Smith, does that pull us close enough to 3 million? Okay. So these are the two areas. Could there be a motion that would say the last place we would want to go to are the counselors and K3 class size reduction? Depending on what scale we reach to once negotiations are completed with San Marcos, we would take the funds or implement the cost savings incrementally between Y and double F, starting with double F, starting with Y, but then going back and forth with double F. Dr. Noel.
I would like to throw in here that the research, the last time I looked at it, and it wasn't all that long ago, research literature does not support the idea that smaller classes yield better results. In terms of measurable outcomes, it doesn't happen. It's just, as a teacher, I'd like small classes. But if our focus is on the kids, it's not the determining variable that I think is commonly believed.
What I've read
Mr.
recently
Heron?
is that it's the teacher that makes the difference,
The teacher makes the
not the class size, but
Yeah.
class
Well,
size is still.
It's a lot of things, but in
Right.
terms, the piece of causality caused by class size is relatively small.
For me, one of my difficulties is that I really feel that the situation with San Marcos is a secondary issue. And our teachers and parents feel very strongly about, it's not just about test scores, which is what we look at. It's also about connecting kids to school and connecting families to school. And that's true for 9th grade class size reduction as well. And so that's why I feel like it should be more balanced. In an ideal world, it should be the secondary district that is what we look at, but it doesn't feel like we can. So that's why my proposal is what it is, and I'm going to go ahead and make that motion. Is there a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay.
Could you repeat the motion?
Right. The motion is that if we need to continue with cost savings, that items Y and double F are the last on our list, that they are tied together in that the first area that we would hit is the counseling ratio would move to 400 to 1. And then it would toggle with double F so that the class size would increase next to 23 to 1. Then it would go back up to a counselor ratio of 430 to 1. Then it'd go to 24 to 1 for double F. And then actually it would go to 25 to 1 before it went back to the counselors, because once we've hit that 430 mark, we're done with the counselors. So that's the motion and the second. Further discussion? Mrs. Deacon?
I just want to say that I hope this is really just an exercise.
So
because,
do I.
And I'm also very hopeful that the staff at San Marcos understands the position that we're all in and is negotiating in such a way that we can spare these other pieces. And I understand we're trying not to look at it as a trade-off, but the exercise we've just been through is a trade-off. So, there's no way getting around that.
Right. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
It passes 4-1 with Dr. Noel being the no vote.
May I summarize the priority then? The first, the last item would be FF.
No, the last two items we would go to, they're paired together, are Y and double F. First, moving the counseling ratio from 394 to 400 to 1. Then down to double F, moving 21.45 to 23 to 1. Then going back to Y if we needed to. This is all depending on where the agreement hits in terms of cost savings with San Marcos. So we hopefully.
Could you explain that, just one more, just the last sentence part of that? What's the link to San Marcos?
Well, we're looking for $433,000 in savings that we've plugged in there, hoping that that's an agreement that we can reach with San Marcos. That's how we got to $3 million. We have to get to $3 million one way or the other, even if that 433 is not in there. So the process that we've just been through is a priority list for items that will go to if the number is somewhere between 0 and 433,000 in terms of savings.
Thank you.
Okay, we are done with item E1, and we are now going to return to the consent items. This is Agenda F. Returning to consent items designated for discussion. There were a number of them. Oops. And first on the list was item D3, approval of staff travel, out-of-state travel, and/or expenses in excess of $500. And who was it that pulled this one?
I pulled that.
Dr. Noel.
I have a question about the funding partnership, funding for Partnership Academies program. That, if I understand that funding, there are multiple components to that, and I wanted to sort that out. They have foundation funding, they have state funding, they have local funding.
That's correct. As far as the cost for Dan Williams going to that, I don't know how, it wasn't specified on there that it was a particular account. It was just the Partnership Academies funding. I can look, there's a way of checking that. It's kind of all put together as far as the budget that they use, if there's a specific.
The trip passed anyway, right?
Yes.
Why is it we get approvals after money's spent?
It's very frustrating, and we have talked about this several times, and occasionally one or two slip by. We can't not put them on, but yes, it's already happened.
Is there a motion?
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes, oh, sorry.
Opposed? No.
Opposed. No. Thank you, Dr. Noel. All right, passes 4-1 with Dr. Noel being the no vote. Next is item D5, and that was Mr. Herron.
I'll move for approval. It's a technicality that I don't care for, but I'll move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Dr. Noel?
Yes, I'm sorry, I vote aye.
All right, so that passes unanimously.
Mr. Herron, we're not happy about having to put this on the agenda either.
Next up was item D6, approval of a contract between Los Padres Council Learning for Life and Santa Barbara Elementary School District for the 09-10 school year.
Yeah, that was, it was I wanted to, again, understand, funding is provided by each school primarily through fundraising. It involves no general fund money, but primarily means, that implies not totally. Yeah.
Through fundraising, exactly, but it can be fundraising, or parent groups often chip in.
Or parents pay if they can.
Parents pay if they can.
Okay. All right.
But it's considered a donation, of course.
All right, thank you. I move to approve that one.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That passes unanimously. Next on the list was D15, acceptance of the memorandum of understanding between the Santa Barbara School Districts and the CSEA on the effects of classified employee layoffs.
I'm going to move for approval, but I'll talk to Dr. Robertson about my concerns. In rereading this, I know the board approved it or looked at it. There's things in here that just defy my logic, but I'll find out from you later on what they are. So I move for approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
It passes unanimously. Next was item D17, approval of the job description for district program specialist for special education.
Yes, well, I wanted a member of the public asked me and then raised the question in public comment with direction on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th bullet. Mm-hmm. And the questions had to do with the phrase placements to a more restrictive level. And the understanding is that that we always try to move people to the least restrictive environment. And so the puzzlement was, why does it say more there? That's why she said perhaps it's a typo.
Dr. Robertson?
It is definitely a typo. But I will go back and check the paperwork, because I was dealing with cutting and pasting a lot of different things, so it may be just that I misspoke. I know, so that's easily remedied.
I kind of have a different opinion on this. I think that it may not be a typo. I believe that it's that a program specialist works at the site level, and in a case where you're looking at the best placement for a student, this person would, with the direction from the director, provide resources and support for site decisions regarding student placements to a more restrictive level, meaning that if a child really wasn't making progress in this position where this place where he was, maybe fully included in the classroom, that he or she needed to move to a special class or that kind of situation. I understand what the speaker was speaking about as far as least restrictive environment. You always want, that's where you go.
Yeah,
but when there's a case when a student is not progressing, meeting the needs or the goals of the IEP, and it's not working. Mm-hmm.
May I suggest that we simply lop off the last clause or so and just say, with direction from a director, provides resources and support for site decisions regarding student placements.
Would that be acceptable?
Well,
I mean, it's true, it's
Well,
going to be both
it-
for going to more restrictive environments and less
It's
restrictive
a more
environments.
inclusive term, and it leaves it.
May I make another suggestion?
Yeah, of
I
course.
think it's particularly instructive to use the examples of a student moving from a resource specialist program to a special day class, or district or regionalized to county programs. Now, I think we can just take out more restrictive level.
Oh.
I mean, we can deal with that part of it, and we can go directly to changes in placement. That notion of making changes in placement such as, or
Okay.
including but not limited to.
Okay,
and
so
we can
it would
eliminate
read,
these
regarding
words.
student placements, including.
Regarding changes in student
Regarding
placements.
changes in student placements,
Comma, including but not limited to.
including but not limited to, and then the
Yes.
list. All right, is there?
I think that does it as far as I
Yeah,
understand.
that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Thank you for the suggestions, Dr.
I did
Moore.
have another, and it is a substance question, under qualifications, oral and written communication. And I wonder why we don't have something about Spanish language there. This I would think being able to speak Spanish would be very important in this job.
That could be something that we could more readily address on a job announcement, that it would be preferable. But normally in a job description, it's not it's not our practice
Well,
that we
again, I
necessarily
guess
put it
my-
down on a job
I guess this
description.
also is then a more inclusive statement, because communication skills implies being able to speak Spanish if you are
Right.
speaking to someone who speaks Spanish.
Well, I thought under the ability to, and it says on the next page, understand and be sensitive to those of culturally and linguistic diverse backgrounds,
Think that covers it?
kind of gets at it. It doesn't specifically say that the person has to speak Spanish, but it does.
Well, and I don't know that we
But
could.
our job announcement could say that.
Or it could
Yeah.
say that it's preferred, because we
Preferred.
just don't know what the pool
We
is going
would
to be
fly the
like.
position that way.
Okay. Is there a motion
I move to
to,
approve it as changed.
as changed? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Mr. Herron, I'm not sure where you are on this.
Yes.
Okay. All those it passes unanimously, sorry.
Thank you.
Then there was item D26, approval of change order number 8, Santa Barbara High School main building waterproofing.
Yeah. Again, I'll move to approve D26. I just wanted to point out that, from start to finish, the project increased almost 50%. And I don't know if that's because the decisions originally we had wrong advice. I know the reasons for it, and it's a lot, all the change orders. I point out that it was a $250,000 change from start to finish on a $400-some project. To me, that's a big change. And yes, we found a lot of things that were wrong, but I guess I wondered, did something go wrong at the beginning that we didn't see all these things? But I'll move approval of D26.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? It passes unanimously. With that, we are on to coming events, which the superintendent talked about at the beginning of the meeting. H, board comments and correspondence. Any board comments or correspondence? Mr. Herron?
Yeah, real quick. I mean, this is out of time. I was really happy to arrange for 30 of our high school students, 10 from each high school, economic students and representing the various economic students that have won prizes recently, to attend the UCSB Economic Forecast Project. I think they enjoyed it. I know the instructors enjoyed it. It was a nice event. And I also want to report that I did attend the autism conference up in Buellton, and learned a lot about autism. I'm sorry we didn't have a better representation, but I did enjoy attending it.
And I was hoping that you might address the pins that a lot of us are wearing.
This was Autism Week. It was a month, Autism Month, and we were all given these by the autism group, and in a packet we received. And I just heard on the radio, TV tonight, that there's signs that they're closer to a solution. It might be, years away, but at least they've determined that there might be a gene that is causing it, which I thought was good news.
All right. Yes, Mrs.
I
Deacon.
just have a few things too. I wanted to mention that 2 of our school sites, McKinley and LaCoumer Junior High, were the drawing locations for kids in architecture. And this is a calendar from this year, but this is what the calendar will look like for the next year, but it'll feature just designs of our 2 schools. And there was a great turnout by students at those schools and all over. Also, Santa Barbara Symphony put on a series of terrific concerts. I got to go to one of them where students were in the audience, and it was fantastic. And I don't know if anyone else wants to talk about the Mariachi Divas at Franklin.
Oh my goodness, we've been busy, haven't we?
But it was a busy time, and it was a great time, in contrast to all these hard things we're doing, getting out to the school sites and seeing all the wonderful things that are happening really helps kind of.
And I
ease
will
the pain.
mention that we were at Franklin at the sort of women's empowerment, girl empowerment presentation there, where they had the Mariachi Divas come and perform for the kids, and we had students get up to speak, and it really was really very special.
And lastly, our great dinner.
Oh, how could we
our team
absolutely not
cuisine,
talk
great
about
dinner
that?
at LaCoumer Junior High,
Yeah.
serenaded by those musicians. And we
Yeah.
held our board meeting there last week, which was terrific. So
And we also saw the play equipment at Santa Barbara Charter.
Go in, yes.
The ribbon cutting, it took them 10 years to get there.
I know, that was great.
It was great, and
Yeah.
I have to admit that when I walked in and the children, unannounced came to me, invited me to their table, shared their lunches with me. It was an exciting time to see how those kids reacted spontaneously.
Right.
I was very, very surprised and pleased.
Dr. Noel?
Santa Barbara Junior High had a very nice event a few days ago, celebrating a program that's been very successful for disadvantaged and at-risk kids. I guess it was founded by Pete Rellis.
Yes.
Fred Rifkin was there, and there was a huge turnout, good food,
Yep.
and great participation, very impressive participation. I look at something like that, and I mean, if it's as good as it looks, my motto is replicate.
Yeah. All right, with that, any future agenda items? We do have a special meeting on this coming Tuesday because
Coming Tuesday,
the May
closed
5th.
session, 4 o'clock, open session 4:30.
And with that, with no board objection, we will move to adjourn this meeting.